Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the special February 13th, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Please silence your cell phones or any electronic pagers or any electronic communication devices. And agendas are located at the back of the room if you need one. If you need to sign up for a speaker request, please let Holly or Joan know, and we'll get that to you to sign up. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to recognize Mr. Mark DeSanto to do the moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Thank you. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
She has the, okay, if she could raise her hand or whatever. You don't see it?
Yes. So if you want to sign up for the speaker request, Ms. Holly is the commission manager. Please contact her or Joan, the assistant.
Ms. Holly, could you recognize yourself so people knew who you were? That's Ms. Holly, if you need to sign up to speak.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd.
First on the agenda is to review and approval of the agenda. Is there any changes that need to be made to the agenda?
Chairman,
Ms. Sadcock.
if I could move item 6 up before 5 on the agenda, so people knew direction and where we're going with the in situ and the mineral, gold, silver, uranium, metal, and stone for Pennington County ordinance and what's going to be next on that.
Okay. That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to move item 6 for direction up to item 5 and move 5 down. Any discussion? Any from the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying,
You have to do roll
Oh.
call.
yeah, we're gonna have to do roll call, sorry.
Excuse me, I have a question. I just want to be clear about.
You need, anytime you speak, you need to come up to the podium, recognize yourself, and address.
Hi, my name is Bruce Ellison. I'm an attorney in Rapid City. I just want to make sure that I didn't want to miss an opportunity to address. I have signed up for the comments on the other, but I do want to make some comments about the hard rock mining, and I didn't know if this was appropriate or what it is that exactly where you're at, and I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
I apologize if I.
I'll go
am not
over
as thorough.
a few more of the rules once we get the agenda set.
Right.
But what we're doing is the hard rock mining ordinance, we're moving up
Okay.
to first, so we can kind of deal with that, and then we'll get into the other ordinance.
So the issue is procedural at this point?
Yes.
Am I
just
correct in that?
Yes, just
Okay.
procedure.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I have no comment about moving it up. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Motion's approved unanimously to approve the agenda with the moving of the item 6 to Bev.
So moved.
Second.
Well, we got it. Motion's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. So next on the, excuse me, next on the agenda is going to be the board direction for completion of future ordinance amendment for the extraction and processing of minerals such as gold, silver, uranium, precious metals, coal, bentonite, dimensions, stone, and decorative stone in Pennington County. Before we get started, I'd like to discuss this just a little bit to give some direction for public comment and for the board. First of all, thank you all for coming here tonight. And what we're going to do is we're going to take public comment. and then we'll come back to the board discussion, and we'll make a decision. On this ordinance that we're talking about right now, just a little background on it, we haven't made any decision on that at this point in time, so we're requesting, it depends on the board, if they want to do a committee to address the hard rock mining, or what they want to do. So please limit your discussion to the hard rock mining on this issue, because that's what this one is. When you come to speak, please speak clearly into the microphone and identify yourself so we all know who you are. And we've got Lori on the line, Lentz from the Planning Commission. She's listening in. She had a lot of work on the ordinance that's in front of us tonight. And I just would like to explain that when you come up to speak, at this point in time, I'd ask the board what they would like to do. Would they like to do public comment first, or would they like to have discussion on this ordinance or this request for a committee first and then go to a little bit of comment? Does anybody have a motion that they would like?
I think public comment would be fine, would be my motion, and then us to discuss as a board.
Mr. Chair,
Mark DeSanto.
I believe that public comment would be fine too, just reiterating that this ordinance is going to be a work in progress. We're not done with the hard rock mining ordinance yet. And so just keep that in mind when you come up to make your comments, that we're going to be working on that to get that as a separate ordinance.
Chairman?
Ms. Hadcock.
If I could, just so there's an understanding, we don't have an ordinance right now for the process of minerals, gold, such as gold, uranium, precious metals, gold, bentonite, dimension stone, and decorative stone at this point. This ordinance tonight is about the extraction, sand, gravel, or rock to be crushed and used in construction, pegmatite minerals, limestone, lime, or iron ore, sand, gypsum, or shale used to make cement or lime. What Lloyd was trying to reiterate is that if this board or the planning department, for us to move forward, we need to get an ordinance for the gold, silver, uranium, basically in situ and hard rock mining. So this ordinance today, we're just talking about an ordinance we made on sand and gravel. The next step for this commission would be to go into in situ or hard rock mining. So tonight, basically, this ordinance isn't going to be talking about silver, gold, and uranium. That's the next ordinance that would come next. This is the first step in an ordinance that will be a two-part step. This will be 320, and I'm going to guess the hard rock and the in situ will be item 321. So everybody has an understanding of what this is about tonight. And we had no ordinance we had 507 and 507B, and the only thing we had on mining was 507B. So this committee was formed because of that. We made an ordinance of about 18 or 21 pages. First step, 320 on sand, gravel, and pegmatites and some others on that. So just so you have an understanding, what we're talking about tonight is an ordinance on the first part, 320. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Hadcock. Further discussion, I'd like to reiterate what Ms. Hadcock has just said. That's what we are discussing tonight. The sand rock ordinance amendment was geared towards more of the, like she said, the extraction of the sand, gravel, and rock for construction. That's what next on our agenda that we're going to discuss. But it does provide a stopgap measure for addressing the extraction of the minerals that the committee did add towards the end, but that's why the feeling of the commission is we may form another committee to address the hard rock mining. One of the things I do want to reiterate that at our last meeting, we decided to have this meeting so we could separate the two. And we're still getting the intermixing of the two. And I just want to reiterate that we did take into public notice and in the meeting, Mr. Phil Two Bowls he came from the Sioux tribe, and read into record, stuff from, let me read that, find that real quick. Yeah. Lost my paper. He read into record a resolution from the Sioux Tribe, and we had a couple other people that read some stuff into record, sorry. And I know they want to speak tonight, but one of the things as the speakers, what I'd like to see you guys do, out of respect for all the people here tonight, is the first 30 seconds of your conversation or your presentation, please iterate what your point is, and be respectful for the other members that are here to talk. And your closing comments, please make the comments to reiterate what your purpose is. But I know there's a lot of people in our audience tonight that have some very emotional and strong feelings over some of what's going on. And I can guarantee you, we are going to have more meetings on the hard rock mining. So you're going to have plenty of time to come forward. And one of the other things I want to iterate, if this board decides to come up with a committee, and I'm sure they will, to address this, that we get the input from our Native American community and a well-rounded community input on that board. I will request that as chairman, and I'm sure this commission will work with that too. So I just want to keep that in mind, that there will be plenty more times to speak and talk. So with that, if the commissioners have any more comments?
May I ask a question?
You please come up to the podium, please.
Again, Bruce Ellison, Rapid City. Actually, I live in Dark Canyon, Long Rapid Creek. Is this a time even for a brief remark on the separation and the establishment of a separate ordinance and a committee to look at that? Is this the time to do that, or is that something that you're just announcing and that we're going beyond that?
No, to address that, we didn't separate. I'll probably have to ask Michelle to come up and explain that a little bit better. But what we did is we added on to the agenda to make it separate, because the committee had put some little bit of safeguards into our mining ordinance that we never had before, but we felt there was more work that needed to be done. And it just happened that the Rochford Road stuff would come up at the same time as this, and so the plan was always to come back up and do some more work on it. But I'll refer to Ms. Hadcock. She was on the committee that chaired it for a year and 2 months.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
How are you, sir?
Sir.
It's under section 507B at the end of this, it's under minerals. And Michelle or Brittany, can you reiterate why we put that, just so it's kind of like the beginning of what we would form for a committee, just so we had something in here so people thought that we didn't forget the in situ
Sure.
or the hard rock mining. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. My only query is this. In other words, and I don't want to take up the time here unduly. I just am trying to understand if there is going to be a committee formed
Right.
to draft such a resolution. I didn't know if this would be the time to do such things as, for example, to volunteer.
Yeah.
Because if so, I would be willing to volunteer to be on that committee to help draft the Hard Rock resolution.
The bottom line with that, you would probably, at that point, I think if this board decides that we're going to take it to the planning department, and then the planning department's going to see who we need involved in it, and then they usually have like different entities come in. We had mining people, we had ranchers, we had a little bit of everything in our last committee. Then they will recommend who needs to be on it, and then at that point, just look, or you can talk to Holly, her office manager, and she'll tell you when it's time to put in if you'd like to be on that committee.
Let me throw something out
Please, sir.
so we can get more clarification of where we're at. I'm looking for a motion to form a committee and direct staff to propose a structure and a format and bring that back to the Board of Commission for approval. That's what I'm looking for. I think maybe if we can get somebody to make that motion, if we get a second, then we know everybody knows where we're going.
Okay, so I should wait then in terms of wanting to volunteer or be raising issues. I just want to emphasize that when I look at this ordinance as proposed, the one thing, it's similar to Lawrence counties, but like with Lawrence counties, it does not address people downflow, downstream in any real way. It creates buffer zones from the immediate area, monitoring in the immediate area. But for those of
Yes.
us that live south or east of Pactola on that water, the city depends upon that water. We've got to look further down. We've got to look way down in terms of a socioeconomic impact.
And sir,
And
we are going to
Sir,
address, we're going to address that.
I understand.
507B, if,
Ms. Hadcock, I'll address.
sorry, Chairman, let's have Michelle
sir.
kind of
I'll run the meeting
507B.
here. Okay. What we're going to do is, like I said, if I can get that motion, then we have some clear direction of where we're going to go.
Thank you, sir.
And then we'll take public comment.
Thank you.
Does anybody,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto?
I would move to form a committee to address the hard rock mining.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to form the committee to address the hard rock. I'm going to reread this. Motion to form a committee to direct staff to propose a structure and a format to bring back to the Board of Commission for approval. Is that what you're?
So moved.
And
Second.
Second, moved by DeSanto, seconded by Hadcock. Discussion. Now we'll have discussion. Does anybody wish to speak on forming that committee? Sir.
Good evening, all. I'm John Hopkins. I'm a resident of Rochford, and you know why I'm here. I want to volunteer for this committee to start with, and I'm here to represent the Black Hills because I don't think it's being fairly represented. And I have here a water permit issued from DENR that states what the state expects out of a mining company. And it says no discharge of water sediments into Rapid Creek or tributaries, blah, 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 blah. Any water maintained in tanks or discharged away from the stream, channels, and into a settling pond or vegetated area to allow suspended solids to settle out. That means they can take any of these heavy metal iron ores or ores they're digging up and spread them out across the ground.
Now, Joe, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to explain that what we're discussing now as we form the committee, that's the motion on the floor. So we want to keep the discussion on the committee.
I understand.
And you did very good. The first comment was you want to be on the committee.
I do, and these two statements I want to make here are just to support making this committee
Okay.
because the state is not taking care of the Black Forest.
Okay.
And it says that if it's necessary to discharge this stuff into Rapid Creek, you got to get permission to do it. That still contaminates Pactola Reservoir. And then it says, if you manage to penetrate an aquifer, you have to report it in 90 days. Well, it's gone by 90 days. The damage is already done. So these are two real critical things that have got to be addressed at this level, not at the state level, because they've obviously blown it off. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
And please, Deb, you have my numbers. Let me in on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Does anybody else would like to speak on the hard rock?
All right, maybe this is the right time, actually.
I just want to.
Gotta read.
Bruce Ellison from Rapid City. I want to urge that the committee be formed. I think it's a very important thing. I think it's important that certainly all parts of the community be represented on this committee, that it allow for the most meaningful and I do mean meaningful input on this. This gold mine that's being proposed is a very seriously impacting our project, impacting our future, I think, in this area. And this commission has an opportunity by setting up an ordinance to allow for greater citizen input, to allow for greater local input and control from not only the citizenry, but also our local government, from the nearby tribes. And the only thing I just want to encourage is, I mentioned before, I think the socioeconomic impact, the scope of the committee. if this is appropriate to ask for that. In addition to what I see on this ordinance, there's a lot I like about it, subject to some of the comments that John had. And certainly there can be some tweaking, but not just the immediate area, but any area that is there's a reasonable nexus of potential impact should there be a mishap, a spill, a leak, whatever it might be. That there be something that also guarantees that the areas, even for exploration, let alone mining, that they be fully surveyed for historical and for sacred sites. So that's going to involve our respective communities' input. And there's also, because this area where this gold mine is so close to Place Schla, again, it's the impacts have to be beyond simply the immediate acre or 2 acres that or whatever a particular operation is immediately going on, but what is that impact? And I also want to mention the impacts because this is so close to Peshla, where there are a lot of ceremonies that are regularly ongoing. As part of a socioeconomic study, to me, it would mean what is the impact of people who wish to worship in that area from our indigenous community. So we have both environmental, but water. Without water, we're an agrarian, we're a agricultural community. Without good water, we're done. And there's no gold mine that hasn't leaked. And this is cyanide. We're talking about something very lethal. So I want to urge that the committee that gets formed take a realistic, hard look. Because our state agencies, from my experience, and I've been doing this for a number of years with our state agencies, they too often think their job is more to promote a permit at the expense and ignoring the environmental and other impacts that a project may have. So I strongly urge that this committee not only be formed of people that really represent our community, but also take a really serious look so that this commission, my commission, you folks, that you really afford us what protection that you can, because I want my grandkids to be by the same house where I live in Dark Canyon. Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to comment, Bruce, that is the goal of creating this committee, is getting a wide variety of people, not only culturally, but also from different work areas that could give the input. So I just wanted,
thank you.
that is the sole purpose, and we're at the beginning stage.
And I support that, but not just input. Let's make it real to protect us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Nancy Hilding, Prairie Hills Audubon Society. I have a question. I'm a little bit confused here. Are we going to be allowed to comment on the 2 paragraphs that are about hard rock mining that are in this ordinance, or not?
Yes, Nancy,
Is
that's
this what we're doing right now at this point?
No. At this point, what we are doing is we have a motion on the floor to form a committee to form a committee for hard rock mining. The original ordinance that you want to talk about is going to be next, and then you can speak on that part.
Well, let me say it differently. There's a moratorium right now, which is
Yes.
going to expire on April 5th or thereabouts. And within this, the withdrawing and the getting rid of, you're getting rid of the part of the construction your section 507B mining permits remove and move to section 320. So you are getting rid of, in this, the current section that applies to hard rock mining, which is just a paragraph in the existing ordinance under the construction. You're getting rid of that. So and the moratorium expires on April 5th. So if there's nothing in place to govern hard rock mining, after this is adopted, we have a hole. We're missing something. So
No, Nancy, I don't want to get confused. I know what you're talking about. What we were talking about now, if you don't have the agenda, we're forming a committee to address hard rock mining in addition to the other ordinance that will be taken up next. So I know
we are going to be allowed to comment on hard rock mining as it appears
Yes.
within these 18
Yes,
pages.
yes.
Later.
Yes.
My name's Derek Kills the Enemy. I'm here to represent my people in the treaties. And I'm hoping that the people here and the people who are pushing this project forward highly consider the treaties, the protection of the land, and the cultural aspect that is tied to this Black Hills and Peshawar. And I'm hoping you consider this project what it is, what it means to us. It's an attack on us spiritually, and I'm hoping everyone here considers that it's not just a few people. There's little children who you're affecting, and I'm hoping this committee you are forming has a high membership of the treaty council members, and to let us put our points in, and I'd like you to consider the implications you guys are making and the harm that you will be causing in the coming months. So,
Derek, I just want to make the comment that Field 2 Eagles at our last meeting put into record the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 and the Act of 1889, and so they are in our records and in our packets, and so we did, that is part of our records, and he read in the resolution from the Sioux tribe also.
okay.
I just wanted to reiterate that we did take the time at this point, and it's in record. Thanks, Derek.
Okay, and you have a good day.
Thanks.
Well, I might as well get this over with. How you doing? My name is James Hawk. I'm from the Hesapa. But, we all get a little wind and a little wind here and there, about what's unachievable and stuff. But as Lakota, we have a virtue. And, it seems like it's never ending. And it's the most saddest thing to watch this unfold after we fought tooth and nail back in the 80s to kill that uranium mine that already contaminated the larger part of our Black Hills. And then yet, we're all one in on the piggy bank here. But when it comes down to it, we suffer one way or another. Each and every one of you. We all know what cancer is. 70% of these women in these hills, these agencies, they die of cancer because of exactly what goes on in these hills, polluting the water. If they could do it, extract without contaminating and leaving a poop hole, then so be it. Maybe we wouldn't have much of a problem. But mind you, the Black Hills belong to the Lakota. The Black Hills, our people will defend the Black Hills. And the Black Hills, our people are prepared to die for the Black Hills. And that just kind of takes you out there on the stretch when I heard the Oglala Sioux Tribal Chairman say that. But it's true, because we watching them die anyway from cancer. Cheyenne River, I don't even know why we eat beef out of there, because the cows probably contaminate by the time it's said and done. But you take your good look with your representative, your tribal representative, Phil. But also this delegation, in collaboration, I think you need to have more input on leadership of the Lakota Nation. And if you can't get them here, I'll get them here for you. That's what I do. But don't cut me off yet. I'm
No,
not done.
I was just going to say,
Hey.
James, I'd be more than welcomed if you've got, that was one of my comments, that if you got people that are willing to serve and step up and be a part of it.
Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal. We were protecting water in Standing Rock. It cost us a whole 2 years of our lifetime. And we was fighting against the Morton County and the Dapple, Tiger Swan. Is this what's coming here? Is this what we want as citizens? taxpayers. By the way, I own name tile. I paid enough taxes in this city. But there has to be some common ground here with a little bit of common sense. That, my grandchildren, it means the world to me. But their grandchildren should be able to have the opportunity to have what's ours, the Lakotas. There's a lot of things that fall around with all your little committees and boards and everything. And you know what? If there's a just like when Alan and Jeggers put together their pro team, we had 2 Indians on out of 20. That's not fair. If we're going to do something that's really going to be for the people, well, let's make sure that each one of our voices are heard. And if it's about hearing voices, I know how to get that done too. So, I just want to let you know, Mr. Commish Lloyd, that the one thing that I am doing is I'm watching. I'm watching real clear. And the report I give to my peers, we don't want to have an imbalance coming out of these meetings now, because it's too critical to what is going to happen to our people. Because they will come up and they will defend the Black Hills at any cost, so that you know that. So when you go and you put your paper together, you're legalizing these paperworks and stuff. You make sure that you thinking about our people at all costs, or we'll have some hell of a debates right in this room. I can guarantee you that.
Thank you, James.
But I could bring some water protectors, land protectors, people, cultivators, people that know to live off the land. And we can't even do that these days because it's about oil. The fossil fuels, man, how many times do we have to bend over and take that one? But we're chicken. We have a federal government that we're just chicken. But in the state of South Dakota, Pennington County, I raised my daughter right here for a purpose, because I thought it could make a difference. So have that understanding.
Thank you, James.
You bet. And you remember me.
James, one of the things I just took away from your conversation is finding the common ground, and I appreciate your comments.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you appreciating it. Right on.
Glenn Williamson, born and raised Sioux Falls, South Dakota, now residing in Hot Springs, South Dakota. Thank you for your
I
time.
didn't catch your name.
Glenn Williamson,
Glenn?
ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Real quick, and I'm no lawyer. I'm also not a scientist. If we're sitting here discussing the need for a committee, let's just do the committee. Let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, we got one more person who,
Well, when you rush the committee, I can grab 10 of you out of here and get a committee going. Let's go.
Glenn,
I know.
that's enough, Glenn.
That ain't going to
That's-
solve nothing.
James.
Hello, I'm Joe Buck Clom. I'm caretaker of Peshlaw. I would like to be on this committee if we can get it formed. Because water is more important than a bunch of thieves. And basically, I think we can do a pretty good impact on preventing a lot of stuff if this committee is formed. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening. Lloyd LaCroix. I watched you grow up in this community. My name is Sandra Little. I've lived in the Black Hills all my life. And the only thing I'm going to say is that I asked for equal representation on this committee. If you're going to have 12 members, 6 of them should be Lakotas. Our treaty people, elders, our future generation. Breaks my heart to see what these people are doing to our sacred Black Hills. I'm sorry for crying, but it really hurts. I've got future grandchildren who I worry about. This water in this Black Hills and this Rapid City is bad. Can't even drink it. It's so contaminated already with chlorine. You ever smell it? Who wants to drink that stuff? We say water is sacred. So you make us piss and shit in it,
Oh.
and then we have to turn around and drink it. Is that what we're going to have to do? Is drink this wastewater? You know why and then wonder why we want to protect the water and what's up in the Black Hills. We never sold our Black Hills. Peshla is sacred. And we put buffalo up there now, and are they going to have to drink that contaminated water? How long are they going to live? So all I ask is that we have equal representation on this commission. I ask that.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you very much.
James, oh, never mind. No, I thought we got a list of people, James.
It,
Matter of fact, I was gonna leave before you kicked out.
Ma'am,
Hello. In Lakota, my name is Inkala Ziwi, Yellowbird Woman in English. My American name is Teresa Lang. I have raised my children here, have been raised here. My grandchildren live now here in Rapid City. And the only comment I have as far as the formation of the committee, again, is what my elder said, that we need equal representation, not only demographically, racially, economically, but also our young generation. I think it's important to remember that at Standing Rock, that spark was ignited by 5 high school children. And we have these millennials that are brilliant, and I would love to see the youth included. This is their future. And I think they have a lot to offer.
thank you.
And not to leave out our elders and our children and every demographic. I'm sure that Rapid City has the numbers on what those demographics are. If we can match that with the committee, I think that would allow equal representation.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you for listening.
My name is Robin Zephyr. I'm Minikaju Lakota from Rapid City. Regarding the formation of this committee, I would echo the thoughts of it should be inclusive of the diversity of the people that have a center, a spiritual center to this land. Many times when we look back at what we do in life, we have to look back at the footprints that we follow and the footprints that we leave. And many times we have to look within ourselves and look in the mirror. There are mirrors everywhere in this world. You look in the eyes of the children, your grandchildren. You look in the eyes of a neighbor, and you can see their soul many times on important issues of life. And when we make important decisions, such as what you're dealing with here and forming this committee to deal with gold mining in the sacred Hesapa, is that you must answer the question at the beginning also. Not how to do it, but should we do it? Many times things that are done for an evil purpose. And economics always enters the fray into the realm of starting what is evil. If you think back in history, my ancestors were a part of the Aboriginal presence here in the Hesapa. The gold issue rose in the 1870s, and that can never be taken away from the history of where we are right now, nor from my people. But when we talk about gold mining again entering a century and a half later, You must learn from mistakes. Otherwise, those mistakes will be repeated. And in that consequence, we lost so much. And we cannot lose anymore. There are sacred sites in this sacred land. In fact, every square inch of this land is sacred. There are sacred sites that exist that are within spitting distance of what this evil enterprise is intending to do. As people in the position in which you are, in the county commissioners for Pennington County, you have such valuable natural resources within your governance. The beauty, the pristine diversity of the biological ecosystem. Not just the animals and the plants, but the humans.
Thank you, Rob.
So I would just echo the thoughts that if you are going to form a committee, there are many people that have voices that are similar to mine. And
Yes.
we hope that they're included.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it.
Can I, just one more thing. I'm just going to ask that you would consider extending the moratorium. If this process is going to take longer than when that date is, that moratorium ought to be extended as well.
Okay, thank you. I just want to reiterate, this is on the forming of the committee for the hard rock mining.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Marceline Eagle. I grew up in Red Shirt Table, South Dakota. I've dealt with uranium mining poisoning my river since I was a little girl. So for the fact that this gold thing is going to happen is just another repeat in history. It's not going to solve anyone's problem. It's not going to solve the economic development on my reservation. It's not going to solve the drug problems. It's not going to solve the alcohol problems. But what can you do is help me protect the water that's left for my children and yours, maybe your grandchildren. But I was up at Stony Rock. I seen what everyone went through. I know what everyone went through. I was there. So this is just another thing happening again. And there are plenty other places that they can dig gold, especially people from Canada. Mineral Mountain is out of Canada. Why are they coming here? Just for money? Well, it's going to destroy our people. It's going to destroy my people, in fact. And this, I'm not consenting to. I do not wish it to be here. I am thankful that you guys are hearing me, each and every one of you. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this. And I hope that you get a lot of people who are like me on your committee.
Thank you, Marceline. Looks like we have one more, two more.
Hello, my name's Jordan Erickson. I'm a teacher, graduate of the Evergreen State College in biology and chemistry. I'm a lot of things, you can make a fancy resume pretty easy. My uncle showed me how to do that. And what you guys are kind of missing here, like even with this meeting, look, you got elders standing. Nobody said anything, So you guys already, the 1868 treaty is bunk. It was never paid. It doesn't exist. It's the 1851, it hasn't been submitted. So, Mr. Farabee, I've noticed you being very
Jordan,
dismissive.
please, we're not,
But
I'm not going to allow names and discussions of commissioners from the public, or
the commission, I thought I was speaking to the commission.
not by name. If you have an issue, let's talk about the issue, but not,
Okay, well,
not the
I
person.
support the idea of 6 and 6. You had an elder here tell you what you need to do.
Thank you, Jordan.
How you doing?
Good.
Sam Greiner. I'm a small-time prospector and small-time a miner in the Black Hills. And there's federal regulations that do govern this. The Forest Service bends over backwards. And I shouldn't say bends over backwards, but it really does give the people of the Black Hills their right for religious places in the Black Hills. For any claim that I try to submit, there's a EIS, an NEPA, there's a cultural and other things that have to go through for me just to get a claim. Now, for me to get anything further, I have to go through a letter of intent and then a plan of operation. And that's where the water comes in. And this is federally regulated, correct? Okay, so I hope you take into consideration the small-time people that are doing this in the Black Hills also, because there's a big difference between large-scale operations like Wharf, Chorus, and all these other people that are doing this, and the small people that live here also. So I hope that goes into consideration also.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate that this is on the form of the committee. I've allowed a lot of leniency tonight because I believed we got a lot of Native American people who have some strong emotional and attachment to this issue. And so I felt it was good to allow some leniency on the speaking today. But
my name's Jack Maraton. I'm the reason that Mineral Mountain's here in the first place. I'm the one that talked them into coming into the Black Hills. And they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. And I know these guys personally.
Tell them to turn it.
Jack, you need to face us.
Graduate of the South Dakota School of Mines. I mean, you have, I imagine Rapid City is proud of the South Dakota School of Mines. Sometimes I wonder if they should name it the South Dakota School of No Mines.
Okay, that's enough, Jack. I'm not going to allow it.
You're not going to allow that either. You don't get that side of it either. But, well, what
You're
I'm
being
saying
antagonizing to the group, and I'm not going to allow that. Please sit down.
Well, I'm just,
Please sit down. It's uncalled for. At this point, I think there's is it Cheryl?
That's Jeannie in the back.
Jeannie, did you have something you wanted to share before I shut down the public comment?
Hi, my name's Jean Roach, born and raised here in Rapid City. I just feel like, yes, there are federal laws, and I think a lot of them have not been addressed as far as the cultural part for the Lakota Nation. And we're not just talking about only us being affected. If that water, at least the contaminated water, gets into the Rapid Creek, then everybody will be affected. It's not going to matter what color we are. And Mineral Mountain has a history of having spills in the Great Lakes and other areas. Even in Battle Creek, they went under a different name. And that's one of the things that they do. They like to change up. And I think a lot of people in Keystone can tell about that story. I'm not really familiar. I just heard about the spills that they've left. But thanks for considering the committee or whatever you're going to do. I'd like to see more people on it. We have a lot of stuff that need to be addressed at this point. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jeannie. I think at this time, I'd enter board ready to take a vote.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to see a board composed of a member and an alternate appointed by each of the five of us. And in that vein, well, I'll go ahead. That's my motion, as substitute motion, as this committee will be assigned by each of us Each of us five will have a primary member and an alternate. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
so to clarify, George,
Microphone.
you believe that this should be a committee of 10?
A committee of five, primary voting member and an alternate, so that if the primary person can't be in attendance, then the alternate can sit in for the primary.
Chairman.
Got a motion on the floor. No second. Motion dies. We're back to the original motion. Ms. Hadcock.
I think we need to consider all areas that we need to cover. It might be 10, it might be 12, it might be 8, it might be 16. I think we need to look into it further to make sure that we have covered all areas before we decide what's going to be on, or who's going to be on the committee, and then come back with recommendations if we have people that we might be missing, or even a board member like George that says, okay, I think Ms. Jeannie Roach should be on there. She represents the tribes in the water district and knows more about the DNR for the tribes, that kind of thing, or somebody else. But bottom line is, I would suggest to make different people on there tonight. I think we need to look into it further. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hadcock. Mr. DeSanto.
I am also in agreement with George in that there should be alternates for each position, but I'm not sure if 5 is enough. So I think we do need to go further, to have further discussion on the number of people that are on the committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Let me say something first, George. My thoughts on this committee is that we get staff together, planning staff, we get a good group of people, and we determine who we need on this, because we need geologists, engineers, we need a wide variety of people. We need native representative, we need people from different areas, different cultures. So I think limiting it to, at this point in time, trying to determine which type people, I'm not even sure until I talk to staff and determine what they feel would, the benefits of what we have in our community to bring them together. I think it should be a wide variety, but they need to come from all different educational backgrounds and all different cultures. And so that's why tonight we just wanted to get the board's thoughts and approval on this so that we could come back to the board and say, this is what staff thinks should be. We can change it at that point in time. But I think today is just too short of a time to stop and really consider everything that's going to be involved and who should all be on there. I think that's another meeting for some debate on who we'd like to see and where we need to go.
So, Mr. Chair, to clarify, basically what we're voting on tonight is that we're going to form a committee, and that's it.
Well, the staff's going to bring recommendations back for Board of Commission approval. The original motion on the floor.
Mr. Chair, do I get a chance or not?
I'm going to just repeat the motion so we all know what's on the floor. Then I'll give it to you, George. The motion on the floor is to form a committee to direct staff to propose a structure and a format and bring it back to the Board of Commissioners. Mr. Farabee.
A committee of 5 people that represent each one of the 5 of us certainly can and should bring in subject matter experts from all varieties, a wide diversity of people to come talk to the committee, but the committee of 5 are the people that should recommend to us. And I guess if you really want to look at how to manage something, that's be the way to do it. This last thing was, from everything I heard, for a year and a half, it was industry that wrote this thing for us. I much prefer a committee of 5 people with alternates. That way there'd always be 5 in attendance, picked by each one of us. We're the elected people of this county.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee. Motion on the floor is to form the committee and direct staff to propose a structure and a format to bring back to the Board of Commissioners for approval.
One more time, Mr. Chair, I don't think
Mr. Farabee.
I don't think it's the staff's responsibility or in their purview to be recommending to us how we run our business.
Mr. Farabee, staff can make recommendations, the board doesn't have to follow it. My belief on this is, I think we need some more input, and to put commissioners in full charge of this, to me, is misguided, because as political, as the commission is, it could be misguided. I think it needs to be a nonpartisan group who don't have a political interest in anything. That's my belief.
Mr.
And that's
Chair,
why
I
the motion.
totally disagree.
You're allowed.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
this will all be discussed and hashed out. Right now, we're just deciding to form the committee. So let's hash it out
at the next
after this meeting.
Yes. No further discussion?
I just want to point out.
You have to speak at the podium, please,
I just want to point out that.
and recognize.
There was one person that came in here in support of this, and everybody else is against it. So why we still want to form a committee?
Sir, this is not about passing an ordinance. Ma'am?
Janet O'Malley, Hypel. If you want a committee of 5, is that going to represent both sides equally? No. And if you pick who you want, is that going to represent the people? All the people? No. I would suggest that the committee be made of equal numbers of each side of the issue.
Thank you, Janet. I think at this point in time, we are going to move on to.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to respond. Each one of us represent about 20,000 people in Pennington County. You understand that, ma'am? Each one of us represent about 20,000 people.
That's good. That's enough. We are going to move on with this. What, you've spoken once already,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
I do believe that it is important for people to know what George just stated, that each one of us represent a large number of people, some of which may not be represented in this crowd.
Point taken. Madam.
Hello, my name is Shantae Rubidu, and I'm actually a member of the Sichanga Lakota Oyate, and I'm actually a student out of Washington State getting my bachelor's degree in Native Environmental Science and Water Ecology. From the investigation and my observation of going out to Peshla, I do know for a fact that there we do need to get further in and just bring more attention to not just us as Indigenous people or the people of Rapid City, the surrounding area, and the people that live on there that probably don't check their mails. You know, being a scientist, science is forever changing. We can't just say that it's okay today, because it might be not okay tomorrow. And so I do know that we need more discoveries, and not only the gentleman that stormed out through fit, whatever he's talking about, School of Mines. I'm getting my degree in Native Environmental Science from a tribal college. So who's he to say that this college is better than the next? So when you guys are picking these people, like the other people here, that they are asking for a fair trial, basically, to be heard on every level. So I ask, if you guys do pick environmental science, as a person in the science field, go to a tribal college. At least let us get that far. Get us to get our foot in the door. Let us be heard.
Thanks,
There's a reason I'm going to Native Environmental Science, because I do have a connection to Mother Earth. So we do need to be grounded, not just us, Indigenous, or, you know, like there is a lot of Indigenous, you know, people that are connected to the Mother Earth, not just Indigenous. So I'm just asking, pick someone from my type of field, a Native Environmental Science, not just from these higher up colleges.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
At this point in time, any further discussion from the board? Mr. Farabee.
I'd like one more comment. Let's say, for example, that I were to pick one of my constituents, Mr. Ellington. Anybody in this room who doesn't think that he wouldn't be a fair representation for all sides and all groups and all thoughts? And he probably would be one of my picks.
Okay, moving right along.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. DeSanto.
I would like to make one more comment as well. I'd like to ask these folks here that spent their time to come here and discuss this with us to also respect the fact that we were voted into this position as a matter of trust. People obviously trusted us for one reason or another. That's how we wound up here. And trust us that we are going to try and create a committee that's going to be fair to all. That's all I ask.
Thank you, Mr. Sandone. I think that was well put.
Another one. New one.
One more. Thank you, sir. What was your name?
Jacob Woodland. I'd like to know who has the final decision and who is on the committee.
At this point in time, we're just discussing staff to bring back recommendations of a structure for the committee.
The list was on the last.
Sure. Can we discuss past those recommendations? Who makes decisions on who's actually on the committee?
We do.
Yeah.
And how specifically will you ensure that there's not only diversity, but equal representation?
We do.
We'll
be making that decision.
How specifically will you make that decision?
We need more discussion to get this all done. Right now, it's just a recommendation of some of the background, what we may need in order to complete the task. But we want a wide variety of people on it.
Is this a scientific task or is this just a matter of opinion?
We don't know yet. We're going to be, like I said, we need some wide variety of backgrounds, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have Ron still on?
Commissioner Buskird has lost his internet connection.
He lost his internet connection. Okay, I think at this point in time, it's time to move on with the vote. Motion on the floor is to form a committee and direct staff to propose a structure and a format and bring it back to the Board of Commission. And then from there, the board will have a discussion on which way to go from there. All in favor, indicate, or we have to do a roll call. If he's offline, we don't have to do a roll call.
If he's gone, we don't. Before we vote, I'll be voting no because I don't think the staff ought to be telling us what to do. Thank you.
Mr. Farabee. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes with 3 ayes and 1 no from Mr. Farabee. Should we take a break before we get to the next one?
5. Lloyd.
Could you please address the moratorium issues?
I would, who would like to discuss the moratorium? PJ, would you like to make a statement on that?
You can discuss it after the 5-minute break if you want.
We'd like to take a 5-minute break so everybody can kind of gather together and so is there a motion for?
Yes, sir.
Motion by Hancock. Second by DeSanto for a break. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Need a motion to come out of break.
Motion to come out of break.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Hancock to come out of break. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 I'll just make a brief comment that we lost internet connection with Mr. Buskird. He will watch the video tomorrow, so we'll continue on as needed. Next on the agenda is the first reading and public hearing of ordinance amendment 17-02 Pennington County to amend the section 103 definitions, section 205B17, General Agriculture District, section 2012-B-12, Heavy Industrial District, section 507B, Mining Permits, and section 511, Fees, and to add section 320, Mining Operation to the Pennington County zoning ordinance. This was continued from our February 6th commission meeting. At this point, the way we are going to do this is several of you guys have been through many of these public hearings before as this has come forward. I will bring up PJ to give us a little bit of background on the committee and the recommendations of what they worked through to get to this point at the first reading. He'll do a little bit of what we had before and where we're going to now. And as we go through this process, we've got a list of names of people that wanted to speak, but that's not going to be limited. But that's just to help to put some structure into this meeting so we can be structured and productive throughout this meeting. So please, there's been a lot of public comment on this. We've got a few areas in the ordinance that people aren't completely satisfied with, but it's made up of a compromise and some hard work from a lot of people. There were some changes made from the planning commission, from the public, and all those have been incorporated into it at this point. So with that, I'll explain. We're going to be going through the planning and zoning's edit edition. That's the one that we'll go through. When we start going through this ordinance, what I'll do is go page by page. So when we get to that point, keep track of where you're at, and when you're speaking, please bring up the section that you are talking on. But what we'll do is we'll take public comment first, and then what we'll do is we'll start going through the ordinance. Is the board okay with that?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto?
did we want to hear from PJ first?
Yes, I'm just kind of getting some concurrence from, everybody's okay with that. With that, I would like PJ Convert, I probably messed up your name.
Chairman?
It's two letters, PJ.
Miss Ag.
Just, the way we did it with the planning is went page by page, so we tell the people in the audience, we're going page 1, anybody have comment on page 1, and then you make your comment on page 2, and then when you get, maybe Kelsey needs page 4 or 5, you just wait till 4 or 5, whenever that comes up, and Kelsey makes her comment. So instead of just making it on page 17 and we're on page 1, it's easier to follow for us, and it's easier to make changes or have discussion through that. So, Lloyd, I don't know how, I guess I wasn't quite understanding where you were going.
I don't want to limit the discussion because, throughout this process, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to calling up technical people that know what's going on, have been on the committee. We may call them up. We may call up on the attorney. We may call PJ up. And people have a certain section that they would like to discuss. If you would like to come up at that point in time when we're discussing that, just raise your hand, and when I say that page, like Deb was saying, and that item that you really want to discuss, raise your hand and we'll do it. The signing sheet is for general comment over the whole thing. But just keep in mind that what we want to do is if somebody else has expressed what you had to say, be respectful of the time, because this is first reading, and the board really needs to get to work on this and do some work by the end of the day. I mean, PJO expressed the moratorium that's up and the time limits that we have, or maybe Michelle could do that, but we really need to get the first reading, and if you concur with what somebody else has said, there's 3 or 4 of you together, and you choose one person in your group to represent you, that would be great. That would be absolutely fantastic. So with that, I'd recognize PJ.
Good evening, PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. I think just like it says in the first paragraph there, on April 5th, 2016, the Board of Commissioners approved the formation of a committee to review construction permits, mining permits, and alternative energy into zoning ordinance. At the same time, he instilled a moratorium or special zoning requirements per South Dakota Codified Law 11-210. The mining ordinance and the construction permits were done second. The alternative energy ordinance was completed in 7 months, and after that was completed and adopted as a new ordinance, that moratorium was lifted. Immediately after that, the committee for the mining, for the 507 was formed, and it was, I think you said 12 months worth of meetings, usually once or twice a month for several hours. After that, when it was finally done, it went to the Planning Commission. They held 4 meetings over the course of about 3 months. They had a special meeting so that they could get more input from the citizens. They moved it out of the Planning Commission in January of this year and then put it before the board in February. So this is going to be the second hearing. It's the second meeting, but still the first hearing, as you have said. As far as the moratorium goes, it has already been extended, so we cannot extend it again. It will end on April 5th, I believe is the date. If we don't have a new moratorium in place, the current zoning ordinances will be in effect until the new ordinance is passed.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
PJ, I don't think you wanted to say a new moratorium. You meant to say a new ordinance, correct? If we don't have a new ordinance,
yeah. Did I say moratorium?
Moratorium.
Yeah, new ordinance, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Unless we have the ordinance in place, then the old one comes into effect. Could you explain a little bit about what we had for an ordinance prior to this?
507B, there's not much. We do have the construction permits, which is several pages. And in 507B, it's just the one that people have the most comments about. But the one that the committee has spent all this time on has a lot more of the controls and criteria and the oversight that we're looking for. And then also now that you've officially recognized the formation of a committee to address the hard rock mining, I'm sure that will be more than just a paragraph for right now. And we did just look at putting in some, like I think you had mentioned, a stopgap measure, because it was mentioned by a citizen that came to the committee, and I believe she was up here earlier, that if we didn't address that 507B, if a new ordinance was passed that would have 320 without changing the current ordinance, it would have been erased. So we took the measures to kind of put that stopgap measure in there until we're able to get the committee together and get a new ordinance before the board.
Okay. Thank you, PJ.
You're welcome.
Board of Commissioners have any questions for PJ? Or any opening statements before we get started?
Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. At this point in time, what we're going to do is we'll open up public comment. I've got a list of people. That's who I'm going to go through first. You know, as I said, for good public speaking, the first 30 seconds is the most we get from you guys. Explain what it is you have a problem with and what you'd like to see done. After that, we'd like to just keep on track. And like I said, as we go through the documents, we will be taking some more public comments. So don't think that just because you're not getting called up now, you've lost your ability. When we get it narrowed down on the pages, if there's a problem in discussion, we'll have it. For this first speaker's sign-up sheet, we have Kelsey Parker.
Good evening, Commissioners. If it's okay with you, I would prefer to kind of give my overall picture of the issues that I have. I think that's a little bit easier than me coming back and forth multiple times, if that's okay with you.
Kelsey, depends on some of your issues. I think she's got
Okay.
some on different pages. We'll bring you back up if you don't, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I can direct you to particular pages as I go through it. I'm Kelsey Parker. I, along with Mr. Hickey, represent a group of concerned citizens. We've had a unique experience of representing these clients when this first issue came up as it related to the construction application with Kroll. As you read through the staff report as it's prepared, I would like you to focus on two important things. And one of those is the reason why this staff report came to be and why this committee was created. And it was in direct response to the issues that arose from Kroll's application for a construction permit. I also want you to focus on what an important issue this is. This isn't something like a vacation rental or off-street parking. This is about mining, and it affects the entire community, not just a limited amount of people. If it weren't for our clients who appealed the recommendation from the planning director to present before this board, there's a good chance that the operation out on Highway 16 would be functioning today. And what that means for Pennington County is there would be negative effects on traffic, environmental issues, reduced property values, and it would have negatively impacted tourism in the Black Hills. And consistent with the application, Kroll would have been mining there until 2041. Using the appeal process that you have created in your zoning ordinance, our clients appealed the recommendation of the planning director. And I think that's really important when you look at the appeal process that has been constructed into this proposed ordinance. Ultimately, that decision was appealed to the South Dakota Supreme Court, which you're very familiar with, and they issued a decision that I think you have to read and consider when reviewing this ordinance as a whole. I also think it's important that we focus on the interests of the people that formed the committee. It was largely made of people from the mining industry. And I think as you'll listen to comments tonight, and hopefully what I will portray to you is that their interests are strongly shown in the staff report, and the interests of Pennington County residents are not. I think there are 4 major things that I'd like to go over with you. And as you know, I presented you a letter, and I also presented you with a red line version of the staff report that actually contains our changes and our proposals so that it's easy to flip through. And that's found on at the end of your packet. Unfortunately, there's no page numbers, so I can't reference it directly. The 4 major issues are, number 1, this board needs to be the final decision maker. Number 2, if this board agrees that the Planning Commission should have the final authority, we need to significantly broaden the scope of the appeal process. As it stands today, there would essentially be no right to appeal. Third, the notice and hearing requirements on the renewal process need to be the same as the original application process. And fourth, which I think is a real issue that we need to spend some time on, is what are we going to do with existing mining operations that are going on today, and how are they going to be impacted by this new ordinance? First, as you know, the staff report provides that the Planning Commission is going to be the final decision maker. I think this is one of those things that you have to focus on who is on the committee and what their interests are. When the Planning Commission makes a decision, it's a board of appointed officials. You, like you indicated, are a board who is representative of this county and the interests of the county residents. And so you should get, at the very least, the opportunity to listen to the citizens, listen to the mining operations, and make a decision, because you're responsible and accountable to the residents of Pennington County. As you're probably uniquely familiar, after the appeal was taken to this circuit court, Kroll also filed a lawsuit against you, alleging that you had taken away some property right that they had obtained by virtue of getting a recommendation from the planning director to approve the construction permit. If the staff report as written goes through, you will expose yourself to continued litigation regarding whether or not a mining operator or owner has obtained some property right just by virtue of a planning commission or a planning director making a recommendation to approve a permit. Our proposal is that the Planning Commission's decision is simply a recommendation to this board. And I think the reality is most of the times this board will simply rubber stamp what the Planning Commission recommends. The Planning Commission will still get the opportunity to have the public hearings, ensure that there's compliance with Section 320, and resolve any other issues that they see are important. It's in the cases where there's some contested issues, like, for example, in Kroll, that it's imperative that these people get an opportunity to go before you and you get an opportunity to hear what's going on. Secondly, the issue with having the planning commission make the final decision essentially takes the citizens' right of referendum away from them, because our state legislature in 1975 created a law that allowed that when you make a legislative decision, it can be referred to a public vote. However, the South Dakota Supreme Court has said that other county boards, like the Board of Adjustments, when they make decisions, the public isn't entitled to that right to referendum. And so it's clear by allowing the Planning Commission to make the final decision that the mining operators had an interest and that citizens can't overturn that decision. If this board decides that the Planning Commission should make the final decision, I think it's also imperative that you change the standard of review. Previously, as the South Dakota Supreme Court discussed in the case that went up to them and was recently handed down, how the people we represent were rightfully entitled to appeal the decision. Kroll argued throughout this process that our people didn't have standing to appeal. And as a direct result of that, these mining operations have sought to narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow the citizens' right to appeal a decision of the Planning Commission. And during some of these meetings, there was an issue of, or a conversation of, do we apply the aggrieved standard? Do we apply affected? Ultimately, how it's presented currently in the staff report, the only people that can appeal the Planning Commission decision are people that live within 500 feet of the mine or are going to be financially harmed or physically injured. This standard is simply unattainable and unrealistic. And quite frankly, it's absurd and it's more stringent than the aggrieved standard. And had this standard been in effect when our clients appealed this decision, we wouldn't have had standing to appeal. And I think that's exactly the goal of what the mining operations want to happen. As I've said, our recommendation is that you get the final decision, but if you agree that the Planning Commission should get the final decision, the standard to appeal should be affected, which is broad enough to cover people in Pennington County that will be affected by those decisions. Thirdly, I made changes to the renewal process. Previously, construction permits were valid for 1 year. That has since been changed to extend them for 5 years. And basically the way that the report is written currently, these mining permits would last in perpetuity. The only way that you could get a public hearing is if you lived within 500 feet of the permit limit, but yet there was no requirement of how these neighboring property owners would receive notice. There was no requirement that they post a sign or send out a letter. The notice requirements are not sufficient. I think that it's more important that after 5 years, again, the mining operation should have to file an application or renewal application that may be more limited, but there's still an opportunity to go before this board. And that was consistent with what the mining operations wanted if the planning director decided to revoke the mining permit. They automatically received a right to a hearing. However, the residents of Pennington County did not receive that same right. Whether the decision is to grant the permit, renew the permit, or revoke the permit, that should be a power of this board. Finally, there has been some emails, I know, going back and forth about some proposed language as it relates to mines that are in existence currently and how we're going to handle those and what we're going to do. The language that has been proposed comes from a Wyoming and a California case who have both courts have adopted the doctrine of diminishing assets, and our Supreme Court has not done that. Although it may be a starting point, there are some pretty serious issues with the language that's proposed. For starters, element number 2 was the area being excavated has to clearly intended to be excavated as measured by objective manifestations, whatever that means. And what's listed is a state mining license. Well, a state mining license doesn't even list what's going to be mined, how much is going to be mined, and how do we measure what their objective manifestations are? Is every mining operation going to say, well, I intended to mine that eventually, therefore I had an objective manifestation of what was going to happen? There has to be some measurement that this board accounts for, that this nonconformity cannot continue to expand and expand and expand. And if you look at South Dakota law, and if you look at your own ordinance, that's consistent with our opinion that if it's expanded, it has to get a new permit. This zoning ordinance in section 401 specifically provides that it's the intent of these zoning ordinances that nonconformities shall not be enlarged upon, expanded, or extended, and any nonconforming use of land shall not be expanded in such a manner as to increase its nonconformity. South Dakota law also provides that in the event or a land use is non-conforming, if there's a period of time of 1 year when the land isn't getting used in that same way, you lose the entitlement to even be grandfathered in as a legal non-conforming use. And it's this board's regulation pursuant to SDCL 11-227 that you get to establish regulations to bring property and land usages out of non-conforming use. Instead, what we proposed is that in the event a mining operation decides to expand in any capacity, they have to reapply under this new ordinance and even the playing field. Because if we allow all these mining operations to continue as is, what was the purpose of creating this committee, and what was the purpose of us going through all this today? The other alternative is in the event that it's time to renew their construction permit or whatever permit it is that they're operating under, at that time, apply as a renewal under this ordinance. There has to be some goal that we get people and mining operations all on the same playing field. And I think it's important to note that this zoning ordinance did do a lot of good, and we're thankful for all the work that the committee did, but there are some major issues, like I pointed out, that need to be resolved. So respectfully, I'd ask that the board adopt the staff report as I prepared it with the red line changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelsey. Just okay, folks. We need to keep order. Just for the information, we've gotten a lot of letters and a lot of public comments. So I just want to reiterate, as Kelsey, we have all your pages and we read through that. I just want to remind everybody to be respectful of the time, and there is going to be plenty of times when these specific items that come up that you're talking about, those are the good times to have the discussion on those. But we want to get through as many people as we can so we can get to work. The next person who signed up was Robin Zephyr.
We'll have to use the guy that was here earlier.
Okay, so he's not here. And I think Derek Kills Enemy. Did you guys, Derek, did you want to speak again? Because we.
I've already spoken.
Okay.
And I really have more other than that. I would like to.
You got to speak up. And we're on the ordinance now, not on the committee anymore, so that's what we'd like comments on.
So, I've already expressed myself, and I would just like to express myself that these ordinances should have a cultural aspect to them, a heavy cultural aspect to them, and I think it's your duty as a public servant to apply those and to make sure that they conform to everybody's ideals, Well, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Okay, folks. I'm going to tear this name up. David Springhetti? Was it close?
I'm David Springhetti. And I just will quickly make two items. One is, I think, traffic safety in any, the entrances to any operations need to be considered in this particular case. You know, you've got huge trucks trying to cross busy traffic on 16, and you know, I've sat and watched both directions there, so it has to be a really big opening for them to get across the road safely. The other item that I would like to see addressed a little, maybe more strongly, is mitigation and for if there are violations, what's the consequences, you know, and do we have serious enough teeth in the ordinance to kind of ensure compliance? So just those 2 points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Next, Bruce Ellis.
Thank you, Bruce Ellison, Rapid City. I just want to address the moratorium question again. I'm not sure I understood the gentleman from the Planning Commission. Today, as I understand it, this body authorized the creation of a committee because it was felt that after a year of work and after the moratorium was put in place to allow for this work, that a decision was made that a separate ordinance should be looked into and created around hard rock mining. So it seems to me this is a new action and would warrant, and would you have the authority, and I would ask you to exercise it because we're just really at the beginning, that you exercise your authority and to issue a moratorium until completion of the work, your work, on the creation of a hard rock ordinance. And it's a new project. So I think you have the authority to do that, and I'd ask that. Thank you.
I would probably look to legal counsel. Michelle Hoffman.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. My understanding of the motion that was made on or about April 5th of 2016 was that the moratorium was as to any and all mining. And with that in mind, under SDCL 11-2-10, any such emergency measure may only be in place for no more than 2 years. So under the statute, we cannot extend the moratorium any further past April 5th of 2018.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we have Brian Tidman.
Good evening. My name is Brian Tiedemann, and
Oh,
I
sorry.
did serve on the committee. Just want to say, first off, thank you for the opportunity to participate in that process and to serve with all of the fine people that were on the committee. What we were tasked to do was to provide the county with a tool to utilize. The old 507B really was insufficient. There wasn't a lot to it, as PJ had mentioned. And so we were tasked with setting out to provide a fact-based regulation that provided a fair approach for everybody involved and a mechanism for addressing the various issues that could arise through that process. In doing so, there needed to be a balance between regulation, public concern, and fair business, and something that is very clear for the board to board, and planning commission to planning commission throughout the years to utilize. So that was kind of our task. Commissioner Hadcock was the lead of that, and she really gave us the direction and helped us understand what we were set out to do. Just to address what you have in front of you tonight, in terms of the ordinance as shown on the screen, What it does is it addresses the following items. First, it shows you how to regulate a mine, both active and inactive. It also shows you how to manage a permit application when it's required. It shows you how to address public concern when there's a concern or when the concern is founded. It shows you how to handle an appeal when an appeal is appropriate. It shows you how to renew a permit for a mine that is following the rules, not expanding its original intent, and meeting the requirements applicable to the mine at that time. It also shows you how to ensure that existing operations with many existing employees continue to operate effectively within the rules that were established when the business decisions and directions were set. So just walking through kind of the process that's involved with what this regulation sets out to do. It's simply to promote health and safety, but also sustain growth and opportunity within our county, which is an essential part of all four of those things are essential parts of our livelihood here. So simply walking through, a mining company would come in and apply for a permit. The county would review that application process. The Planning Commission would hold a hearing, a public hearing, and that's after notification. So anybody with any kind of concern relative to the application could come in. There's no limits on who could speak at that hearing. There could be conditions set based off of the information that's heard during that hearing. So whatever comes up, I've heard a few things tonight, such as traffic. I know that was an issue during the Kroll process. That very easily could have been addressed in a hearing process. The Planning Commission could go ahead and set conditions on the permit based on what they hear. The Planning Commission then is tasked with making a decision, and once that decision is made, there's an appeal process. As Ms. Parker mentioned, the appeal process is very well defined in the ordinance as it is written right now. I don't know that there's ever a process where you could appease every single party involved with the process, but I think that this at least provides you some parameters. And then if the appeal happens, the county board would hear the situation, hear the issue, and we kind of essentially would go through the same process. So at that point, the county board would have the opportunity to make a decision, and that would be the final decision if it was appealed up to the board. So just pointing out that that's how the thing would flow. I think that needs to be clarified. In regards to whether the board should have the final decision or the Planning Commission, I guess that's a question that you all can deliberate on. The way it is set right now, the final decision would be the Planning Commission's, unless again it's appealed to the board. The question, I guess, for you all to consider is it the best practice for every single decision on this type of a permit to actually go to the board? Does that make a lot of sense, especially when you look at the history where there have been a lot of mines in this county without issues where they would not have needed to go to the board? So do we really need to change it such that they would all have to go to the board for the final answer? I guess that's a question that you can deliberate on. In terms of the appeal, I think I already kind of hit on that. There's a very clear process. Opening it up to the term affected was something that the committee and the Planning Commission heard multiple times. The wording was set such that we could provide some clear guidelines on what truly could be appealed rather than anybody that is opposed to that operation coming in and doing the appeal. The renewal side of things kind of go hand in hand with existing operations. Really what we're talking about there is a number of businesses in the county that have established their business, their strategy, their 30-year plan, 50-year plan, whatever it might be, based off of one set of rules. Changing the rules with this new ordinance by making any kind of changes to the way it's written currently would affect those future operations. And I think that that's something that you carefully have to consider, considering the amount of money that's been invested in that and considering the fact that there's so many people that work in these operations or service these operations. There's a lot of people that could be affected if these things change. So I just want to point that out. I appreciate all that you're doing on this. I appreciate your time and would be happy to answer any questions at any point through the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we have Danielle Weavers. Did I pronounce that right, Danielle?
Did. Danielle Weavers with Peatling and Sons, also a resident of Wonka, South Dakota. I just want to echo what Brian said essentially, and thank you for the opportunity to serve as technical advisor on the committee. And if there's any questions, I'm right here if you need them. Otherwise, I'll let you be.
Thank you, Danielle. Next is Nancy Hilding. Is Nancy still out there? Oh, there she is. Now, Nancy, this is just the general comment part period when we go through page by page.
Yeah,
Okay.
Nancy Hilding, Prairie Hills Audubon Society. I attended most of the mine committee meetings. I prefer to do the page by page commenting, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm not going to hit in the page by page commenting. And there's one thing that I don't know quite where to stick it. So I've constantly said I would like you to look at Lawrence County and what they're doing. And one thing that they do is they differentiate between large and small operations, both for sand and gravel and minerals. So there's large, small, sand, gravel, large, small minerals. They charge different money and they treat them differently in terms of what they have to comply with. And I think that this is my thought is I think the mining companies, I agree with the blonde-haired lady, they substantially dominated the committee a lot, and I think that I can understand why they want this. They want something concrete where they know if they comply with it, they'll get their permit. And I see this as very situational, site-specific issues. I want flexibility and for the Planning Commission to be able to look at everything individually. I would very much like for you to consider creating a differentiation between large and small, where the little guy in the middle of nowhere doesn't have to comply with the same thing as a large operator that's close to highly dense population. So you don't have that in the shape that you currently do. And I hope all of my other comments I can stuff into the
When they come up.
page by page.
Okay.
I'll be doing a lot of page by page.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. At this point in time, I'd like to start going over the agenda, but I want to take a moment and express that, this ordinance, I'll reiterate again, was not created in a vacuum. It took a lot of time and energy from a wide variety of people, and they took a lot of input from not only public, private. We've gotten some that came in the mail, and also there's been adjustments. I'd like to thank those people who participated in that committee, and I'd like to thank Ms. Hadcock for taking on such a challenge. I mean, I want you to stop and think about this ordinance for a little bit. A year and 2 months just on this one, there was still wind energy and some construction permits that they went through and reviewed, and the variety of people and the public comment that come in during those meetings was tremendous. It was a heck of a task to get us to where we're at today. One of the things I want to express to the public as we go through this is not everybody's going to like it. And that's a fair thing about ordinances is it's supposed to find some common ground that you can agree on to get through. One of the things I want to stress is the deadline. As we said, April 5th, we don't get the first reading and second reading done with something, we could end up going back to what we had, which was nowhere close to some of this. So that's important, folks, to remember that. And one of the other things I want you to remember as we go through this is we can always come back and make amendments. There's nothing wrong with that. I know I've heard plenty of comments, let's get through this and do it right now. But we're kind of at that deadline and there's nothing wrong that we can't do as it goes on and come back and make amendments. So I just want to keep that in everybody's minds before we get started, that this isn't a finished document, okay? So as we go through this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to hear, first, just a second, I'm still, when I go through this, oh, you guys are on that list? Okay.
The list.
Oh, sorry. I am sorry. There was a second page. I apologize. I'll show you. There's 2 pages. I apologize. So we'll finish with the public comment part. Okay. I'll open it up, but I'd like to ask you guys to please try to keep it to a minimum so we can get started on the work. Gary Mullins? You got to help me out, Gary. My name gets mixed up all the time too. You got to hear that.
I'm Gary Mallums from Rockerville. I'll try to keep it to the 30 seconds because you told me you lose attention after 30 seconds. I got 3 points I'd like to make. One of them's on the 320 provision that almost does away with the zoning on the Agriculture 1. The old ordinance or zoning was very limited on the amount of rock quarry you could have. You couldn't have a commercial pit on an Ag 1. And that's what we've got up there on the Crow. 2, we get almost $400 million for tourist industry in the Black Hills area. That's according to the Rapid City Travel Commission. And we're talking about putting a gravel pit right on 16 in one of the most picturesque highways. And I can just imagine what this would look like. All you got to do is remember what Sturgis Road looks like today in northwest Rapid City. Is that what you want on Highway 16? And the third thing I have, we have a water well up there supplying our people. And part of the Kroll operation was putting in a ready mix plant, and they're probably going to wash gravel and use a tremendous amount of water. Well, during the dry years, in the early 2000s, our well was starting to pump air when Bear Country would irrigate their right-of-way. It would recharge, but I can just imagine the amount of millions of gallons it's going to take out of the same formation that we're in. And so that's basically what I got. And I suggest that we not approve this first reading. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Dwayne Abada?
Thank you. My name is Dwayne Abada, and I'm a resident of Pennington County. And I was on the Ad Hoc Mining Committee. I want to salute Commissioner Hadcock for leading the committee, for doing a great job, and other members of the committee as well. Let me first start by saying early, the first item on the agenda of tonight's meeting, makeup of a committee took about an hour, and you can see that it's far from over. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of dissent, and a lot of agreement. This committee, I don't know how, the Ad Hoc Mining Committee, I don't know how it was made up. And by the way, as I go through these points, I mean no disrespect to anybody on the commission, Deb Hadcock or the planning director. I was added on the committee about 6 months after the work had started. And when I was added, it was clear to me that the document had already been written. As far as I know, I am the only resident on that, I was the only resident on that mining committee. I do not support OA 1702 as written or as submitted. I think it's inappropriate, and it certainly needs a lot of cleanup. I was unaware of the mission of the committee. I don't think I ever saw a task document or a mission statement, nor, frankly, I didn't know who was on the committee and who was off, because the same people sort of showed up at every meeting, sat around the same table, and there wasn't any formal way the meeting was run. Certainly wasn't Robert's Rules of Order. Perhaps it shouldn't have been anyway. But just to show you, just to illustrate the point that I did not know who was on the committee until the end of the work. So I do not support OA 17-02 as written. I do strongly support the way it was revised by Attorney Kelsey Parker. And the last thing I want to say is I believe that the moratorium is actually an artificial deadline, because this county worked nicely with 507A and B, although you can argue their effectiveness, worked nicely up to the point that we introduced OA 1702. And there's no reason why we have to force this issue through by the moratorium deadline. A poor document is going to be a worse case, a poor situation than what we already have in place. And for that, I'll thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Bedoin. Next we have James Hawk. He's gone. I'm thinking the next one's Brett. I wanted to say Redley, but I can't even.
I type everything, so my print is horrible. My name is Barrett Wendt. I'm a citizen of Rapid City, Pennington County.
That does not look like that.
No, you should see my signature. Very, very brief. I think Kelsey did an excellent job presenting what we're concerned about as citizens. I would just ask you level the playing field, like she said. Citizens equal with the mining operation. You, as commissioners, need to make the final decision on the vote. As Kelsey said, I think a lot of times it'll be a rubber stamp, which I think it has been in the past. It's just these major issues like the coal mine that gets a lot of attention because of where it's at. You all need to make that decision as elected officials, not volunteers of appointed folks. The only other thing I would say is, on the limitation of operation, the final thing that is clearly, from my understanding and reading of it, supporting mining operations only. That is not doing anything to protect the citizens or the county. You need to change that. You need to protect the citizens. You need to protect the county from future lawsuits. George probably near and dear to his heart, this septic thing. When I moved into my house, I didn't have to comply with any septic laws. Those are put in place. I now comply with those. How is that any different than me complying with new laws? The mining operations have to do the same thing. As laws change, they need to expand operations. They need to comply with the new rules. There is no difference. You shouldn't make it harder for citizens than you should for the companies that operate here. We want them here. We need them here. We need the jobs. But that doesn't mean we give them open-ended, unlimited expansion just because they planned 20 years ago to do something. So That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thanks for all the work on it. Great job.
Next, we have Steve Vance.
Good evening. As you said, I'm Steve Vance. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. And I agree with quite a bit of what was said here, you know, for diversity, involving residents, involving people downstream. As you heard me say, I'm from the Cheyenne River. We have been affected. The community I'm from is called Cherry Creek. That's where I was born and lived a lot of my life there, and I'm back over there again, but we are still living with the effects from Homestake. As a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, I wonder how you're going to go with permitting presently. If there is nothing for hard rock and you're discussing aggregate components for cement, and what would you be doing presently for permit? In the discussion with the forming a committee with possibly giving advice to commission, there was a lady mentioned the youth. I would like to see someone who can go out there and bring the voice of 12, 14, 16-year-olds to this discussion. As a historic preservation officer, I am instilled with preservation of historic and cultural properties under federal law. And it's kind of sad that we talk about the future and we don't involve 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds who sometimes have common sense. We have all these laws. We have all these geologists and engineers and, you know, all these technical people with, you know, many, many years of college background and can't come up with something simple as common sense. And yet the youth, they have that. They're honest. They haven't learned to swindle or anything yet. They come right out and tell what they want. So in that, I didn't want to take up the time in that to comment about that. But if there's someone who's going to sit on that committee, I think they should reach out. Someone who's able to reach out to the youth and bring their voice. Because when we formed a board at one time, the attorneys came in and they said, well, you can't use anybody under 18. You know, it's their future. They should have voice. So I supported the comments about bringing the local people in, you know, and the citizens in and the youth and downstream. So in the development of this ordinance, and I read quite a few. I don't know if you ever read the 1872 Mining Act. That's got its own issues, as any other ordinance. But why is there an ordinance? There's rules. We all got rules. If I come in your house, you have rules. You come onto the land, there's other rules. And the one I always bring up is, one of the laws I always bring up is the natural law. Water goes downstream. Air circles, moves. They don't stay in one place. Land. What happens to the land is what we eat, we consume. You heard the voice of tourism in this area. Many, many people come to the Black Hills. You heard the comments from several of the tribal members about how they feel about the land. And like I said, there's federal law that I think needs to run parallel with whatever you develop here, cultural, historical. I think any type of digging, you're uncovering history, whether it be golden shovel, groundbreaking ceremony, and you open up that ground and you find bones, or you find an arrowhead, or you find a bullet or a spur, that's history. So I think every earth-disturbing action should have a process in which how they go about it. I know some of the discussion is going to be later on about hard rock mining and in situ mining with uranium, And those are major issues. I have a brother who lives in Salt Lake City, and I seen Kennecott. I seen what they have done up there, and it's happening in other places. And it would sure be a sad sight to see that here in the Black Hills. So preservation, again, is what we are instilled with. We are responsible people, every one of us. You have a responsibility. Everybody behind me has a responsibility to the future. And how can we make it better? So I think in the development of this ordinance, and we will submit written comment from the tribe. I had several of the councilmen call me and says, "How's it going?" I says, "Well, we're getting there. I'll get up on there." So I'll go back with the information I have up to now. I do have all kinds of chicken scratches on the and I got the one that has all the emails where people submitted stuff, and a lot of them are good. But I think, again, there was a comment about consequence. Why is there an ordinance? Why is there a law to follow? And if you don't follow it, what's the consequence? And it should be severe, because you heard the effects of what had happened in the past. The mining in the past has contaminated water, has caused illness. There is still mercury, down in the Cheyenne River. And our EPD office goes down there and constantly and checks it, and he comes back and he tells me it's still hot down there. So these things are long-term effects in the types of mining that they do. The chemicals that they use, the displacement of water, either injecting it into the ground. You heard people talk about the aquifer. So I think NHPA, NEPA, NAGPRA, all the federal laws should be reiterated in this ordinance. Because in reading it, I haven't seen anything culturally or historically towards National Historic Preservation Act. So that's my recommendation, is that in development, is that you look at the federal law.
Thank you, Steve.
And with that, I thank you.
Want to speak, ma'am? No? Did you want to speak? Okay. Okay. Anybody else like to speak?
Glenn Williamson, Hot Springs, South Dakota. Thank you again for your time. Just a couple, and I thank you for your time again. A lot of people here. Some were at Standing Rock, some were not. I'd like to, and I can't tell you how to do your job. I have no idea. I'm a very simple-minded man. When he mentioned that old mining law, I saw you react with an affirmative nod, as if you might even read it. Other people on your committee were looking over there, doing whatever, like I usually do when I'm not interested in what people say. So I firstly would like to really ask you guys, before you go to bed tonight, to think about who your constituents are. Because we're right here. I don't live in Pennington County, and that's the interesting thing about this situation. This problem, as I see it, it reaches far outside of Pennington County. And so I do not envy you at all in this situation, to be honest. I know where I stand, and you guys probably know where you stand too. Where it gets a little fuzzy for me is semantics and the legalese of it, and so I'm so glad that we have people who have that covered. The other point I would like to make real quick, federal law supersedes state law, supersedes county law, but there is a law that supersedes all that. And Mr. Vance referred to it, and that's natural law. And that's also treaty law. And I'm proud to be an ally to my Indigenous brothers and sisters. I paid a heavy price for that, to be a part of that volunteer army, as I call it. Your constituents, it's the entire planet in this situation. That's got to be hard. And I wish that there was a quicker, simpler way that we could solve this. But there isn't. And maybe that this is the best we can do right now. Semantics are important in this in your line of work, and I understand that. And I apologize for my rather curt nature regarding the committee. Maybe I really don't have a clue. Having said that, these issues are very simply solved by the Fort Laramie Treaty, which is that none of this is ours. I don't even belong here. And if we keep that in mind and move forward with the idea that we're guests here, not just in Pennington County, not just the Black Hills of South Dakota, but this entire planet, and maybe approach that with that mindset, it seems really cut and dry to a water protector such as myself. And I know it's probably not that simple, but the days of the good old boys are over, especially out here. We really need to start going back to you know, I don't know what happened, why we can make a law and then just decide we can ignore that law. But to me, that supreme law, that treaty law, still is in effect, and it still needs to be honored. And I would implore you guys to look into that and maybe think about that in your decision as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, at this time, oh, we got two more people want to, okay, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to take a few more public comments, and then we're going to have to, I would suggest taking another break. So,
my name is Marguerite McPhillips. I'm from Rockerville, South Dakota. My husband and I came out here for the rally in 1991 and fell totally in love with the Black Hills. Not only is it sacred to the American Indians, but it was also sacred to my husband and I. And this mining by this company is a detriment to our being here in this county. It's a detriment. We're ruining the corridor 16. This is our lifeblood. People use this constantly. When I came down there the other day in the snow, the snow wasn't even removed. It was a mess. And what's going to happen when there's motorcycles and when the trucks are coming out and kids are going to school in the wintertime? We can't have it. It's the wrong place. And again, it's just as sacred to me as it's the American Indians. I think it's the most beautiful place in the world, and we have to protect it every way we can. Thank you.
thanks, Margaret. I just want to reiterate that this ordinance wasn't in effect back then. And this is a result of that, and we're working towards that, and I would like some support on that. Did we have any more? I think we had another young lady.
Hi again. Okay, so this is about the gravel. I guess as far as being a member of the Rosewood Sioux tribe, I know this is a major issue. I do ask that the Federal Indian Treaty Council, the reserve, our water rights, always must be known. I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to notify our tribal spiritual leaders, elders, our community, and our youth so that we can better understand the topics of the discussion as we move forward in a path of negotiation. I guess we're trying to get the litigation done here. So what I'm trying to say is the gravel that is being disturbed on these sacred sites. It doesn't only affect Peshwa, but it affects the surrounding areas within blocks, miles, feet. So I guess if we can start recognizing that the groundwater is an interconnection of the surface, and groundwater makes this a single resource. So there is granite, there's all types of other rocks and elements and minerals that are being disturbed. So when not you guys per se, but the people that stand behind, the people that are digging and understand respecting the land, they need to understand too that it's not just the water that they're using. There will be more chemicals involved, like the cyanide, that is going to go into these rocks that there is going to be pockets in there, and eventually it is going to run downstream, and it will get into the water, and there is no way to get those the cyanide or the metal out of those rocks. It tends to just keep proceeding down the stream into our only water resource and our only drinking water that we know as Pennington County and the surrounding areas are our visitors. And there was a young lady talking about the money being because of the what's being destroyed and the visitors and stuff like that. So no one's going to want to come here if our water is polluted. So I think our water rights need to be honored as well as our winter rights. All people need to be notified of what's in the water, not just the cover, you know, because there is a shallow subduction zone that affects all the minerals in the waters. I guess we can start from the agate to the metamorphic, any other rocks are, that would be in those sites.
Thank you.
But the water does flow from one end to the other, either way you look at it.
Thank you. As you've seen, we've had several speakers speak several times, so like I said at the beginning, let's kind of be respectful, and we still got the ordinance to go through, and it's 8 o'clock. So you have one more point?
Right,
You need to identify yourself.
Jordan Erickson, Rapid City teacher, and there was part of my racial equity. I'm trained in racial equity. Okay, thanks. By the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, out of New Orleans. Okay, so E3. Does that make sense to you?
No.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And thank you, Mr. Farabee, for re-engaging and listening to people after I brought that up. I appreciate that. Okay. So I just wanted to say, okay, I support this if we are really serious about it. Okay, because if we're really serious about this point, then that gives all of us, the popular support, the power to kill this, and that's what we want. Okay, now the next one is 8 is it's the performance bond piece, and it's lower down. I think it's H. It's near the end. I'm sorry. But the point I want to put on the performance bond is, can we tie the performance bond to failure? Okay, if this mining company fails, can we say what companies are gonna get the money to restore this land after you guys mess it up again?
Okay, Jordan, I know we're going to be addressing that as we go through this page by page. So when we go through the ordinance page by page.
Bring it up again at that point?
No, we'll be discussing that bonding, what it means, who's responsible and so forth.
Can I be a part of that discussion?
Yes,
All right, thank you.
just stick around. We got
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Mike Mueller. Thank you for the opportunity. I've got 3 R's I want to share with you. One is respect. I respect what the committee's efforts have gotten us to. I've also liked to use the R as reasonable. I think Ms. Parker's presentation and the modifications to the report are very reasonable. And I think you should take those into consideration. The last R is the word right. This ring on my hand, as an engineer, I took an oath to do the public good in all of my efforts. And I just hope that your vote tonight reflects the public good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. With no further comments, at this time, I'd probably entertain a motion to take a short recess so we can regroup. And what I'd like to do when we come back from break is start going through the ordinance page by page, and it'll be the planning and zoning part of it with the edits. So
I would make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Before we do, how long are we going to go? These folks should know. We're going to go until we're done, or we're going to go until a certain time?
Well, I think we need to get through it tonight. So, yeah. We got 22 pages to go to. Some we're gonna go fast, from my understanding, we probably got about 4 hot spots that we have to really work through. And on those ones where anytime there's a change to this, I'm gonna ask for a motion from the board.
I know a lot of you guys have money, so why don't you buy us some pizza? Make it a party, you know? Let's make civil discourse fun.
I think we should set a time, but I guess, whatever, you know.
I know you do, like I said, we set the special meeting for tonight to take some public comment before we get to work on this, and we're gonna have to try and work hard to get through it. That would be my hope to vote on it tonight. For these first reading, it'd be only first reading, there's still gonna be a second reading, which would come to the 20th. So there'd be another public meeting on the 20th, and then on that vote, that would be the final if it's passed.
There's been a motion.
There's been a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're on a break. Need a motion to come out of break.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Farabee, seconded by Haggard to come out of break. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. At this point, folks, we're gonna start going through the ordinance, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go like page 1, and I'd ask if there's anything that needs to be discussed on that. If none, I'd look for a motion to approve each page as we go. So right now, what you have up in front of you, I believe, Counselor, is the edited version with the red.
Correct, yes, you have the edited version from after the planning commission, right? Yes, planning department and state's attorney, the edited version.
Okay. And states, okay. Helen, do you have something on page 1?
Nancy Hilding, Prayer
Nancy,
Hills
sorry.
Audubon Society. This is related to page 21 of 22 or
No,
18 of 18.
we're
No, it's
sticking-
tied in, okay? So you should have here, depending on whether you fix this elsewhere, section 510, which is conditional use permit, because you will find out that when you added the 2 paragraphs to save, to have a holding thing for minerals, you're putting a process in here that conflicts with the conditional use process. So you've said that mineral mining is going to be done by conditional use. Thank you, I appreciate that. But the process of a hearing and appeal for conditional use is different than what you have in this ordinance, okay? And the other thing that you don't have is, I wanted you to do conditional use, thank you. Lawrence County, when it has conditional use, it also has the laundry list of terms that guide the commission in deciding when to approve a conditional use or not. You do not have that. You have the laundry list in the conditional use in section 510, which is completely inappropriate for mining. So you're either going to need to fix this on page 21 or you're going to have to fix it here by amending conditional use. So you have a choice, but one of them is to say you're going to amend 510 conditional use, and then later on you're going to have to do that, and you're not going to be able to approve it tonight.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other comments from the board? Or George Farabee?
And that's probably a good place for clarification. Tonight's the first reading.
First reading.
And whether we approve it or not, that's not final. We have to have at least a second reading before it becomes law, so to speak.
Thank you, George. I would look for a motion on page 1 from the board.
Chairman. Just discussion for a minute.
Mrs.
It was It was said that this all came about because of the report from Kroll. Actually, this all came about from some ordinance that need to be changed, and if you look in general description, it says the Board of Commissioners approved the formation of a committee to review construction, mining, alternative energy of the zoning ordinance, and submittal of possible ordinance amendments. The committee was formed to discuss proposed sections to 507B pertaining to mining permits. The committee met for several months and it rewrote the ordinance pertaining to mining. Actually, what came about was we needed ordinances on a few things, not just that. So actually, we already had started on alternative energy, which was solar and wind, and we already knew we needed to do construction permits. So this wasn't only for Kroll or any other mining company. It was, the bottom line was we needed to change ordinances, and we formed committees to do that because we figured the public input on the ordinances and the community was important on these changes, and that's why they all came about. So someone had said it was just for Kroll. It was actually because we had no ordinance. We had a construction permit and a mining permit. So, and we started noticing things on a few of these, and 4 of them were changed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hadcock. Any changes that need to be made, page 1? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve page 1.
Motion to approve page 1.
Motion's been made.
Second?
Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving page 1, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we come to page 2, which has section 2212, heavy industrial district, and 320 mining operations. Nancy?
Prairie Hills Audubon disagrees with these being permitted uses. We think that it should be a conditional use in both general ag and heavy industrial. We think that the impacts are potentially severe and that one size does not fit all. You can have a small operation in the middle of somebody's own private land, miles from anybody else, or you can have a large mine abutting high-density residential areas. And we think it should be conditional use everywhere. At the very least, it should be conditional use in general ag. And also, as I have suggested previously, you should split off the little ones from the big ones, and you could, in every instant, treat the little ones differently than the big ones. And so we once again object to having this as permitted use. Okay, but I know you're going to ignore me. So I shouldn't be so cynical. All right, so I'm going to go now specifically to B12. You have inserted here dimension stone and decorative stone at the request of an operator. You should not do this. Why? Because it creates legal chaos. Because there is a statute 45-6B-4, which puts limits on what you can do when you're into hard rock mining versus sand and gravel. In sand and gravel, these limits do not apply, but they apply to minerals.
Nancy, that's been omitted out.
Oh, you've thrown that out?
Yeah, that's
okay.
out.
Well, good. Thank you. That was the smart thing to do.
Are you working off the old version? Because there's.
Oh, well, I do not know whether the one if somebody scribbled little things on the side, whether you're obeying that or not. Okay, so if the little things are scribbled on the side, even though you guys haven't voted on that, you've adopted that?
Those have been admitted in the planning and zoning and changed.
That was not discussed. I was at the planning and zoning.
Hold on. Michelle?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. Those are recommended changes by planning and zoning and legal that will need to be acted upon at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the
All right,
clarification.
so I think it would be very smart. I agree with the, well, not quite how it's explained here, but it would be very smart to cross out dimension stone and decorative stone. It saves you legal hassle.
Thank you.
All right, okay, so let's then to move down here to the paragraph, an operator shall obtain a mining permit for Pennington County. That sentence, this is just grammar stuff that you keep not fixing. Originally, the 45-6, which is sand and gravel, was just sand, gravel, and rock. And then everybody wants to add an exclusion for their type of mineral mining. So pegmatite minerals was added. And then limestone, iron ore, sand, and gypsum or shale, which is qualified as to make cement or lime. And you don't get all of your conjunctions or whatever in here correctly. It needs to be very clear that the limestone, iron ore, sand, gypsum, or shale has to be used to make cement or lime. So you have deleted, you need an or for between pegmatite minerals and limestone, and then you need something like which are used to make cement or lime, because it has to be very clear that the limestone, the iron ore, the sand and gypsum, or shale are qualified as only to be when used for cement or lime. For example, you cannot mine iron ore unless it's to be used for cement or lime. You need to work on your little details in that clause to make it match 45-6. All right, so I'm suggesting that you insert between pegmatites and minerals the words or for, and that after shale you insert which are used to make cement or lime. So it's very clear that used to make cement or lime qualifies limestone, iron ore, sand, gypsum, and shale.
Brittany or Michelle,
Making it
I'm,
match the
I'm going to
state
ask for
statute.
some clarification, Nancy.
Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. I'm just looking at what the state has, and it actually has not a semicolon after construction, just a comma. And then after pegmatite minerals, it has a semicolon. That's the only difference in the punctuation.
All right, but then it goes down, or, and shale, or other materials that are used to make cement or lime.
Or shale used to make cement or lime.
Yep. No, you're not looking at the regulations. You're looking at something off of a DNR website. That's not the regulation.
Miss Nancy?
Ms.
Um,
Hadcock?
You have made your suggestion, honey, and then I think we're moving forward on there.
All right,
so thank
okay.
you.
She's not reading the law. She's reading something off the DNR website. All right, okay, so then I am objecting further down. The mining of sand, gravel, and rock is allowed only in the following zoning districts or future land use designations. You know, I went to some land use planning meetings. I don't think it's done yet. How you can know what a future land use designation is when you haven't finished the land use plan? And why are we even putting that in there? I mean, who cares what the future land use designation is? So I suggest you cross out future land use designations and you cross out the Forest Service lands, public lands. I mean, I don't think it's really relevant, and it makes you kind of cynical about public involvement in the land use plan. Okay, so then I'm going down to purpose. And when we get to purpose, and it says, and minimize potential adverse environmental effects through the use of best management practices, I request that you cross out through the use of best management practices. I think that minimizes the sentence of potential adverse environmental effects. I mean, we have lots of ways to prevent adverse environmental effects besides the use of best management practices. And I think that minimizes and harms adverse environmental effects by limiting what we can do to fix them.
Thank you, Nancy.
And so I just cross out through the use of best management practices. And also, all consistent with a comprehensive plan, You know, I don't understand that. We haven't even finished writing the comprehensive plan yet, the new one. But I would like you to cross out through the use of best management
Thank you,
practices.
Nancy.
And I have repeatedly given you the state statute for this thing that you're ignoring.
Thank you, Nancy. We do have a recommendation on page 2 to cross out dimension stone and decorative stones. Any other objections on page 2? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve page 2 with the exception of removing dimension stone and decorative stone.
That'd be my motion.
It's been moved by Ms. Hadcock,
Second for discussion, I have one question.
seconded by Mark DeSanto for discussion. Mark.
Mr. Chair. Michelle? Section 320, first paragraph that she was referring to, do you see anything ambiguous about that at all?
I believe the language comes straight from SDCL 45-6-65, with the exception of a few particular minerals. The statute says an operator shall obtain a license to mine for sand, gravel, rock, to be crushed and used in construction, pegamite-type materials, or for limestone, iron ore, sand, gypsum, shell, and then has a couple pozzolana or other materials used in the process of making cement or lime. So what I can speak to is that this language is essentially lifted from South Dakota Codified Law in Chapter 45-5A.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on page 2?
No.
Commissioner, or Chairman.
Ms. Hadcock.
Someone said there wasn't a mission or a purpose, and if you look on item B, that was beginning to end, that was set in there in this ordinance. So the mission was set forth right away, and it says the purpose of 320, and basically that was the mission of this group. So that was put in there from the beginning, and it was never removed from the beginning. So there was a mission and there was a purpose.
Thank you, Ms. Hadcock.
And I'm sorry to
Miss-
interrupt, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I'm not sure if I cited the correct codified law section 45-6-65.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Chair,
Motion-
before we leave
Mr.
that
Farabee.
definition, since limestone is used in western Pennington County in place of gravel, then it would make it very, very clear that the English is not just to make cement or lime. And the folks in Pierre may or may not know what they've written, but limestone, everything west of here is limestone on roads. Right, Tom? So I think before we pass on that, let's make sure we got the English. Any English teachers in here? The grammar's not good.
What are you suggesting, Mr.
Well, I'm saying that we don't say that that's okay until we get it ironed out. The fact that if it's limestone only for cement or lime, that's not good for Pennington County. Because all the roads, gravel roads west of here are limestone.
It says limestone, George.
It does have limestone and are for use.
You
to
don't
make
understand this,
cement
let's
or
leave it
lime.
open until we get an English teacher to figure it out.
What you're trying to do, and what we've always been trying to do.
Miss Nancy, you got to recognize yourself. would you?
Nancy Hilding, is we're trying to stay within, the South Dakota law has two tiers for regulating mining. There's 45-6 and 45-6B. 45-6 is sand, gravel, and rock and aggregate, okay? 45-6B is minerals. 45-6 is short, it doesn't have a lot of conditions in it. 45-6B is huge, long, and it has rules, and it's very complex, okay? So you have more constraints and limits on you when you wander off into 45-6B. One of which is you may not make regulations that are inconsistent with or in conflict with the state regulations. So you have more hoops and hassle to jump through if you go wandering off into 45-6B. When you added dimension stone, you wandered off into 45-6B, And the state's attorney and peer told you not to do that. If you start messing around and including limestone without qualifying it for cement, you're wandering off into 45-6B, into a different set of legal issues. So this is not about sanity, it's about keeping clear that you're in 45-6 versus being in 45-6B.
Okay, Nancy,
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. If I might make a suggestion, certainly the language could be improved upon for purposes of this first read, and I would suggest that the motion be to approve page 2 with the elimination of the dimension stone and decorative stone reference, and planning department and legal can try and work on the language in that paragraph to maybe clarify some of Ms. Hilding's concerns.
So moved.
well, I was just going to ask, is the motion maker and the seconder okay with that friendly amendment?
Sure.
Yes.
Motion maker's okay, seconder's okay. So that motion is to scratch the dimension in stone and instruct planning staff and legal to work on the language of the section.
Concerning the limestone, the definition, operator shall obtain a mining permit, kind of work on that language.
And the
Okay.
bottom line is sand.
Mr. Farabee.
Gravel in western Pennington County is limestone.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I think we got a couple more speakers. Brian?
Has to include
Brian
all.
Tiedemann from the committee. Just to clarify Commissioner Farabee's concern, the point that says rock to be crushed would cover limestone.
Yes.
Limestone is a rock that would be crushed for construction use, so just want to point that out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
They covered.
Tom, I think I seen you had a desire to speak. You okay?
Tom Wilsey, Highway Department. I was just going to mention that limestone and pegmatite are both used for graveling in the Black Hills. But I understand now with the rock to be crushed and used for construction, I understand that too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Next we come to page 3. And this has to do more with item C of authority and some definitions. Do we see any changes that need to be made to page 3? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve page 3.
So moved.
Moved by DeSanto.
Second.
Seconded by Farabee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimous. Next we come to page 4. And this has to do with some more of definitions. I see we do have one red fixture, and it has to do with neighborhood, and it says a geographically localized community within a larger town, suburb, or rural. Can Brittany or somebody explain to me why this was added?
We used the word neighborhood later in the ordinance, so we felt a need to define it.
Okay. So that's the only change that come from planning and zoning and, okay. Does the commissioner see, anybody from the audience see anything else on page 4?
And Mr. Chair,
Mr. Farabee.
this email we got from Charles Click, whatever, from School of Mines. Everybody got this thing, right? He had a suggestion for mining operation as being more extensive than what's in the proposed ordinance.
Yeah.
And I would agree with what he's saying.
Any further discussion? If none, I look for a motion to approve with the change that adds neighborhood, geographically localized community with a larger city, town, suburb, and rural area.
And the definition provided to us by this retired professor from the School of Mines.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
Commissioner Farabee,
Yes.
your suggestion that we expand the mining operation sentence to include what?
The definition that he provided for us in this email dated February 9th.
It actually
To
includes
just
that.
add mineral? Is that what you're
Yeah,
suggesting?
that's what he tells us to do. So
I would second that. Is that a substitute motion?
I'll add it on to the,
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I think the problem is we are going to be working on a separate ordinance dealing with minerals, dealing with oil, dealing with gas. So that's why it's not referenced under our definition of mining operation, because we are actually dealing with aggregate mining under Section 320.
I agree.
Mike Hickey, I agree with Michelle. The definition of mineral in South Dakota law is much broader than what you're talking about. So I think you're going to fundamentally change the
mining
ordinance
operation.
by including that word.
I agree.
Okay. Looks like we have Nancy again.
Do you know what that says?
The problem with all of this is when you go to page 21, 22, where you add your two paragraphs to rescue having nothing about minerals, you are requiring that at a minimum, you changed that now. At least in the old version, shall be in conformance at a minimum with section 2320. I have to read these suggested changes, but when on page 21, you require everybody to comply with section 320 when they're doing mineral mining, then the definitions in here apply to mineral mining. So, I mean, there's problems with that, with the two paragraphs on page 21, 22. You need the lawyer lady to look at them and have some escape
Yeah.
clauses in there.
Yeah, we'll look at those at page 21.
Thank you, Ms. Nancy.
I
Thank
don't know if
you.
you know what I'm saying, but the way that is written, everything in here also applies to mineral mining, which you don't want.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. From what, right now, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the addition of the neighborhood. Unless,
Take it off.
no, that was to add it.
I'll do amendment to take, not put it in there. Or not
No,
amendment,
no.
but a or whatever you call it.
There wasn't,
I don't
there
have
wasn't
a
a
motion at
motion
all.
that,
No one has.
I thought
we still have the original motion just to approve the neighborhood
about the mineral.
without the mineral.
Thank you.
That'd be the attorney's,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
would it be appropriate to further define mining operation by adding to the end of the sentence, the act, process, or industry of extracting resources from the earth to be used for gravel, aggregate, specifying what the uses are? Rather than adding mineral, specify that particular use of mining operation. Anybody?
Mining or a mining operation.
I'll second that.
I think he's asking for information.
Well, I am, and if somebody can help me out here, I would make a motion to do that, just to
Michelle,
further.
do we need to add that?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I'm not sure that that's necessary, and I think it's a little redundant since in our purpose, under the first paragraph, we're talking about the extraction of aggregate.
On purpose and applicability, it has all that in there.
And this is just a definition to generally describe what we believe are mining operations in general.
Danielle?
For the sake of discussion, during second reading, I think we could make a note of this and do some research and change it during second reading if we need to.
Okay.
If that's something that could help us out.
Danielle, excuse me, Chairman, Danielle, do you have something?
Adka.
Yeah, I think putting that in there, it tangles up with that stopgap on that 507, those two paragraphs that you have there, because then it starts to tangle the two definitions together, no matter what you do if you add mineral into that statement.
Mr.
And
Chair.
that one actually refers
Mr.
back
Dis-
to 320 for the rules, so then it pulls all that information back into there.
I'm not after hearing what Michelle had to say, I'm not recommending adding mineral any longer. I'm just asking if we should add aggregate gravel to the end of that sentence to more specify.
It still kind of does it with 320 though, because your 320 or your 507 refers back to your 320 and says you have to follow that to some degree. So I'm not sure how that's going to work either.
So it would do harm to this.
Yeah, so that generic definition really helps out for you to use that stopgap, I believe. Does that make sense?
Yes, because mining operation can equally apply to aggregate mining or mineral mining. And since we have 507B dealing with mineral, the general broad definition of mining operation works for both.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we're still on the original motion on the floor is to approve page 4 with the addition of neighborhood. Yeah, geography. I'm getting tired. Localized community with a large city, town, suburb, rural area.
So moved.
I think we already did.
Oh, we already did.
Yep.
You and George.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
1 no from Mr. Farabee. Next, we come to page 5. Ms. Kelsey.
I'm back. You probably didn't miss me too much, but just wanted to go back to the point of why this section is so important. And I think it's indicative that we sit here today and that the mining operations are not coming up and saying there's some problems we see with this ordinance. They're supportive of it as a whole. And so I think this is an important reason why they support it, is because it takes away the power of this county commissioners to make final decisions. And I've already explained the ramifications of that to this board. As my language as proposed, it would simply be a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and this board would have the discretion to have another public hearing, and it would just give this board the opportunity to hear from the community and also from the mining operations to present their sides of the story. And I think it's only a fair compromise of what your role is as county commissioners.
Thank you, Kelsey. Ms. Nancy?
Yeah. We have repeatedly requested more time for the public involvement. In our opinion, the state law on sand and gravel is woefully inadequate. There is no opportunity for public comment to DNR. There's no opportunity for a contested case hearing. They put notice in the paper 15 days before they're starting operation. What for? So we can all go buy air purifiers? So local control in the county, bless you, is where the public is going to have input. Thank you. This is wonderful, all right? But, however, the mining companies, when they're asking for lots of things, will come and tell us how many years they spend preparing for this, the huge amount of effort they spend preparing. The public, if they want to contest and argue, is going to have 30 days notice, okay? And then we are going to have 5 days to write an appeal, or to write a notice of an appeal. So we have very little time to learn about it, respond, organize, hire a lawyer, develop arguments before we might be fighting. So we are asking for a longer time period of 45 days instead of 30 days. We are also suggesting, if we repeatedly have, that you look at Lawrence County, who has done lots of interactions with mines. They have a public information meeting before the Planning Commission, before all this hearing process even starts, where no decision is made. And once again, we suggest that you have large and small-scale division between mines, and a large-scale mine could be required to have an information meeting, but a small-scale mine not. So we, once again, cite Torrance County, who we think has some very brilliant ideas that we would like you to think about.
Thank you,
But
Nancy.
right now, we're asking for 45 days instead of 30 days notice, okay? So, so then I'm going to move down the page here, down to mining permit application review. The thing that we see, remember how we had all these Native Americans in the room earlier? The thing that I don't see there is we're requesting information about cultural, historic, archaeological stuff. Okay.
To be.
Oh, is that not on page 5?
Nope, page 6.
Oh, no, it is. It's down there. Mining permit application review, A3, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, we're suggesting that you add in there information about tribal, historic preservation, cultural information. The mining company under 45-6 is required 30 days before they start to mine to send a letter, a notice to the Department of Education.
I'm going to recognize Ms. Hadcock to address some of this.
Miss Nancy, on agency comments, all comments received, it's in 2B on 6, federal, state, and tribal. I met with some ladies, Native American women, for about 4 hours, and we are, there will be some changes on that with 45-6, the SHPO with historic preservation and the NEPA acts.
So you're going to put something in there?
That's page 6.
It's part of you already know, the mining permit application review goes on to page 6,
All
and
right,
if you look under 2B.
So you're going to put something about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we once again asked for something to be put in here about endangered species. All right, okay.
Thank you, Nancy. Looks like we have Mr. Hickey.
Mike Hickey, I just want to reemphasize the importance of this section. Earlier, you heard a remark that if you don't change, if you leave this language as written, that you're somehow going to be inundated with having to deal with all of these permits. Under the language that Kelsey proposed, it's a recommendation that comes to this committee automatically. If it's not contested, it goes on your consent calendar, and you just approve it. But if somebody pulls it from the consent calendar or there's an objection, then you can actually have a hearing. You're not going to be inundated with 99 times out of 100. So with all due respect, to make this, you have to make this a recommendation that comes to this board for approval. The other thing is, if as written, you have 5 days to appeal. That's just simply not realistic. I mean, if you look at most statutes in the state of South Dakota, they give 30 days. You don't need that time period if you just make the decision of the Planning Commission a recommendation and then ultimately comes to this board. I cannot urge that strongly enough. That has to change.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
Thank you.
Michelle Hoffman.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. That argument leads to page 6, and I think it's important to advise the public and the board as to a proposed change by Legal and Planning Department, which concerns the arguments that were just made as well as the paragraph F concerning appeal of Planning Commission decision. It's actually the recommendation, the Planning Department and Legal, that the standard be stated as affected by. So the first sentence in paragraph F on page 6, would read, the applicant or any person affected by a decision of the Planning Commission on an application for a mining permit may appeal to the county board. I think that addresses some of the concerns that Ms. Parker and Mr. Hickey have addressed. The affected by standard is broader. Therefore, if there's a Planning Commission decision that the public disagrees with, they'll be able to appeal that decision to the Board of Commissioners. So I think that strikes a balance. The initial application would be decided by the Planning Commission, But this opens up the number of individuals who might be able to appeal that decision to the board.
So Chairman.
So, Ms. Hadcock, just before we start on this, maybe we should be working on 5 and 6 together?
Yes, sir.
So that way we can stay on the same page.
Because the concern is that if it's left under a grieve standard or a narrower standard, that individuals who feel that they're affected by the Planning Commission's decision will not have the ability to address their grievances before this board. But by broadening that standard, they will have the ability to pursue an appeal.
Okay, Ms. Hadcock.
So here's, and I think I talked to you about this, Michelle. So it's consent, and I talked about if it was a recommendation from planning, and it came up to the Board of Commissioners, and if it was a good Planning Commission and it goes to consent calendar, we could still pull it off, the public could still pull it off. If there was an issue in planning, it would go on regular agenda just like any other item. But when we talked about this, what was the issue? Because if we do that, is everything going to go to a referendum?
Well, first
or
of all,
can go to a referendum from that? Because I think it would alleviate a lot of the issues that we're having with aggrieved, effective, the final, and everything, because again, you have a consent agenda, and then you have a regular agenda, so if it was a recommendation, just like we do on all our other stuff we do in planning, and we did it as a consent agenda, and they had no issues, then the consent mining company. If not, it's on regular agenda, which means we're gonna have controversy and we're gonna have issues.
first of all, if you make the change to affected, the idea of a consent agenda is really unnecessary. The application would be presented to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is filled with individuals who have a great deal of technical knowledge. That application is heard. If it's granted and a member of the public disagrees, they can appeal. There's really no need for a consent agenda process if you open up the standard to affected. And in fact, to my knowledge, and Planning and Zoning can speak to this, to my knowledge, they've never denied an appeal based upon lack of standing.
So Michelle, my question is, if I moved it, or this board moved it to consent and regular agenda and just move forward on mining companies through consent and regular agenda, is there going to be a problem with the referendum of everything we decide?
Well,
is
that
it
gets-
legislative or is it administrative?
Well, first of all, that kind of jumps ahead. But to try and answer your question, decisions of the Planning Commission are not subject to referendum. Decisions by the Board of Commissioner, if they are legislative, are subject to referendum.
But this is quasi-judicial.
Mr. Farabee.
With that being said, again, if we open up the appeal process to individuals who are affected, anyone who disagrees with a Planning Commission decision would be able to appeal to the Board of Commissioners. So again, the consent agenda process doesn't serve a purpose. With regards to the ability to refer a decision by the Board of Commissioners, again, it gets down to legislative or administrative.
So
now, ultimately, what I would perceive happening is this. That would just take the approval of an individual permit application. Okay, let's say it's approved by the Planning Commission and appealed to the Board of Commissioners. At that time, the Board of Commissioners approves that same individual mining application. This is where there is a bit of a gray area. The question would be is whether that's legislative or administrative. In my opinion, it would be administrative. There is a particular case.
Michelle, what if the Mr. Farabee comes up and says, I'd like to see that at the next agenda. There was a lot of issues at the Planning Commission. I don't think they should have the final decision. I don't think the public needs to appeal. I would like to bring it forward. How does he do that as a commissioner?
As a commissioner, I suppose, as a commissioner, I don't know, as a private citizen, I suppose he could appeal.
That's where I'm having an issue, because again, we are the Board of Commissioners in a sense, and if we have, his whole district has an issue with it, and no one appeals it, and he's thinking, well, I see that there's an issue and I'd like to, he can't appeal it?
Well, the question would be if his whole district disagrees with the decision, I would imagine one of his constituents would file an appeal.
Well, I'm just saying, in the world of George would like to do it, what would happen? He'd have to tell his constituents to do it for him?
Well, he is a private citizen. I suppose he could file his own appeal.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I should be, as a commissioner, if I'm seeing enough there, I don't think that it should be the final, it should be the recommendation. And how we get there, I don't know, because I'm still here to protect the county and the public and make sure mining companies can do their jobs. But I still think through the consent and the regular agenda, it's a good way to do it. The only thing is it legislative and can it be referred? Because I don't think everything should just be referred just because it goes to the next step and can be referred. I want to make sure in one sense you're protecting the public, but you're also protecting a mining company, because anybody and everybody that wants to come in one sense, can come in. And sometimes I don't have a problem with that, because this board decides if they're going to have issues or not anyway. And most of the time, if it's contentious, it will go from the planning commission to the Board of Commissioners anyway.
Okay,
So what I'm saying is legislative, and can it be referred because it went to the planning commission, because it went to the Board of Commissioners and was recommended by the planning commissioner through a consent agenda or a regular agenda item?
So this is how the process would go if you let me answer the question.
I'm
So-
sorry. I just wanted you to make sure you
So
understood
the
what I was
planning
asking.
commission's decision is appealed to the Board of Commissioners. At that time, the Board of Commissioners affirms the approval of that particular individual mining application. So at that point, individuals who are opposed to that mining application will seek to refer that particular agenda item. Then most likely a phone call will be made to my office inquiring, is it legislative or administrative? My position will be that it's administrative based upon the case of Kirschman versus Hutchinson. However, what will happen then is there will be a civil suit by the citizens who oppose the mining industry seeking a writ of mandamus from circuit court ordering you to hold a referendum. At that point, ultimately, the circuit court will make their decision, and ultimately either party may appeal that to the Supreme Court. The reason for that is the case, Kirschman versus Hutchinson, deals with the grant of a conditional use permit. In that case, the Supreme Court concluded that because there was discretion given to, or the Board of Commissioners retained discretion, that it was legislative. This is the problem. Every case comes down to a fact basis, okay? The bottom line is what the court based their decision on was that the CUP ordinance in that case simply said, Board of Commissioners, you may grant conditional use permits. There was no objective criteria. There was no detailed plan. And in this case, it dealt with a 320 animal hog farm confinement facility. So the Supreme Court said, you know what? Your CUP ordinance just says, Board, you can grant whatever CUP you want. They pointed out that that didn't really put the public on notice that there would be a hog farm facility possibly located next door. It also pointed out there was no criteria, no objective, detailed plan. In this instance, I would argue to the Supreme Court that we have a very detailed plan. We have a lot of objective criteria upon which the board, the Planning Commission, and then the Board of Commissioners would apply, and therefore it'd be administrative. But you're asking me to predict what the Supreme Court would decide 2 years from now, and I can't tell you. I can only tell you, in my opinion, based upon my review of the law, I believe it would be administrative.
Sorry, Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms.
So
Hager.
my bottom line is, if you did it through consent or regular agenda item, is it legislative or administrative? And that's the bottom line for me. I think it would eliminate a lot of these paragraphs through appeal or aggrieved, affected, and some of the issues that are going on both sides. The other thing is, and I had a good discussion and a bit debate about consent agenda and regular agendas and how that worked. either way, they can appeal and it's gonna go to the next step. How it is appealed is the definition in here. But I told this company the same thing. I've never seen anybody have to come in with a specific like this, and they think that will happen, and I truly believe it won't, because we have done that over and over through city council and other issues that I've been on. And if someone wants to bring it up from the public, we have not stopped them as a city council that I seen in 6 years there or 3 years here.
We're not
Usually hear it. So,
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Okay, we need to finish with.
I have a motion.
Ms. Hadcock, are you finished with?
so
I think there's more discussion. I know I'd like to say something and, but if you have them,
But
you
let me
finished?
finish, George. So the bottom line is, this is what my issue is. The referendum of anything that can be on there, if I move it to the consent and myself and make a motion that way and regular agenda, what's the issues going forward?
If you put it on consent calendar, and individuals who are opposed to the mining application will seek to refer that particular application to referendum.
And they can.
They will seek, and then, as I pointed out, it will go up to the Supreme Court. That's ultimately a judge to decide. I can tell you what our position would be, but they can seek to send it to referendum.
Okay, now, Mr. Farabee, you,
I've got a motion.
okay.
And I move that we adopt the language submitted to us by, I can't say blonde, Miss Parker, for E Echo 2.
You're gonna need more clarification than that. You're gonna have to read what the recommendation is.
The language that she submitted to us in this big thick packet, or like I say, Echo 2.
It should be at the back of your book.
Way in the back of the book, back here, page 521.
Page 6.
I move
Commissioners,
that we adopt that language.
I don't believe everybody has that copy.
That's why I said we need clarification on what it reads.
You want to read it to us?
It's B.
Right here.
Mike Hickey, it's on page
Mr.
5.
Hickey, let us get organized.
Okay,
here.
I'm just gonna, it's paragraph 2 on page 5 of 21, which is in the section
Way in the back.
way in the back. Here, I'll show it to you.
Well, there's 2 pages. There's their letters, and then there's.
There you go.
I don't know if I agree with all that. Either grant the application, deny the application, or send it back. We don't ever send it back.
Well, yeah, we do.
No, we don't.
Well, we should have sent Crowell's back. We tried. I tried
I
2
know.
years ago.
Okay, let's, I'm trying to read here. So from Mr. Hickey, did you have a comment?
Well, I guess, 2 things, I guess, real quickly. I don't understand why the planning commission is so resistant to allowing this board to make the final decision. That makes no sense to me, frankly. Those people are not elected, this commission is. And the second thing, once a permit is granted by the planning, okay, you're gonna have the same issue that you had with Kroll. Is that a property right that if you then somehow take away or reverse because there's an appeal, have we deprived them of their property right? That's why it's important that this commission make the final decision and just have a recommendation from the planning commission. I don't see the harm in that at all, frankly.
Okay,
That's my position.
Ms. Hoffman.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I know that's the argument, but I don't, see the basis for arguing because a planning commission approves a permit that upon appeal, there is a taking of a property right. The most likely litigation that's going to occur is if we don't recognize legal nonconforming use. That's where the argument for taking of a vested property right will occur. The fact that this board would overturn, despite that maybe that was an argument made in an appeal, it wasn't given any credence, and I just don't see it.
Mr. Chair, I had a motion. If my motion died, then we'll move on.
I didn't hear a second on the motion. We were
Well, I
reviewing
Did
it.
you ask?
We started talking.
Yeah.
So,
We should have, either it died or got a second, one of the two.
you should
Then we can
hear his
discuss.
motion and then see if we get a second.
Well, clarify your motion, Mr.
My motion is to adopt paragraph Echo 2 from the submission by Ms. Parker on page, way back there, page 5 of 21.
I'll second for discussion.
Motion's been made to adopt from Ms. Kelsey's recommendations of E2 and seconded for discussion. We've got discussion.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Larson, and I'm an attorney. I represent Peatling and Sons. And I just wanted to clarify my opinion of the state of the law on the referendum, because that was a question that you had asked. And I wanted to refer you to two separate opinions, and I'm happy to provide those to you or discuss them with you after this hearing. But I did want to let you know that the Kirschman case that Michelle Hoffman has noted has some very specific language in it about what is an administrative decision and what is a legislative decision. And the court notes that where a board has discretion as to what it may do and acts under that discretion, it is a legislative decision and is subject to referendum. And so when a board has the discretion to act or not act, it is likely to be considered a legislative decision by the South Dakota Supreme Court. If that is the goal, to have every challenged mining permit go to referendum, I don't think that's the goal, but if that is the goal, then you want it at the board level. There is a second case. It's the Beshan versus Moody County Court of Commissioners. And in that case, a planning and zoning level board made the decision, identical decisions, whether or not to allow animal feedlots. At the county commission level where it was made, it was subject to referendum. At a lower level board, such as planning and zoning, it was held to be an administrative decision and not subject to referendum. So if you are seeking to allow the referendum of each challenged mining permit, then you should keep it at the board level. But if, as I believe, you just want the public discussion able to come to the county commission, then you would stick with the decision to leave it at the planning and zoning level and then have any appeals heard by the county commission. It still allows you to hear grievances on the permits that become challenged by citizens, and it will prevent unnecessary litigation going forward. I know that if a citizen were to refer this to the auditor for a vote and Ms. Hoffman were to say that it is not a referable issue, after taking all of those steps, that citizen is surely going to appeal that to the circuit court and to the Supreme Court, and it's going to hold this permit in limbo for up to 2 years. We all know how long the Kroll decision took. And so I just wanted to point that out, and I'm more than happy to discuss that case law with anyone that is interested in it.
Point of clarification.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Farabee.
Point of clarification. Where did the referendum come into this business?
I asked.
Where's the referendum? The only thing that's referable is the ordinance itself. But the application of the ordinance, as I understand the law, is not referable to the people. It's appealable to the circuit court, but it's not referable to the people. Where do you get that statute?
It's in the Kirschman versus Hutchinson County Board of Commissioners Supreme Court opinion, where the Hutchinson County Board of Commissioners approved a hog lot operation under a conditional use
What
permit.
statute says that it can be this is a quasi-judicial decision of application of this ordinance. Now, the ordinance itself is referable, but not the application of it.
Mr. Farabee, the statute is SDCL 7-18A-15.1, which dictates that any legislative decision of a board of county commissioners is subject to the referendum process.
Can you read that again, ma'am?
It's SDCL 7-18A-15.1, and that provides that any legislative decision of a board of county commissioners is subject to the referendum process.
But the application of this is not legislative, it's quasi-judicial. Story.
I would respectfully say that the South Dakota Supreme Court has disagreed with that. And we have different judges sitting on our court now. It's possible a different decision could come down, but I would say that it would be litigated and it would be brought to the Supreme Court level if it was decided by the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
We have, yes.
Jason Smiley. I represent GCC Dakota, owner of the cement plant in Rapid City. It's getting to be a pile of attorneys up here, and so not to offer one more legal opinion, but I've looked at these issues, and in fact, I think it was in my first letter to planning and zoning that's probably in your pack as well. I would echo what Ms. Larson said, and I think the issue in terms of whether it's legislative or administrative is in the broad nature of the reason that the application can be denied. On behalf of my client, I had pushed for a very discrete set of criteria by which you would determine if they've met those criteria, they get the permit. And at the committee level and then at the planning commission level, there was a lot of discussion about should we leave some broad, open-ended language. And that's the version that you have in front of you, is that if it's consistent with the purpose of Section 320. Well, when you go back to the beginning of the proposed ordinance and you look at the purpose of Section 320, it is the general public welfare, et cetera, the broad, open-ended language. In my humble opinion, that is what makes it a legislative act, because you've left it so wide open that it could be really almost anything, so long as this body believes it is in the public's interest. I think it's very open-ended, and that, in my opinion, is what makes it legislative and ultimately subject to a referendum. It's up to the commissioners to choose which way they want to go with this, but I think that's the legal effect.
Thank you, Jason. I think we still got to, I'd like to get some comments from the commissioners. Okay.
Again, I think just listening to all of this, we've had 3-4 lawyers up here. Why would we want to complicate it this much? This is what led to the lawsuit with Kroll in the first place. The citizens should have the right to take this to referendum as a vote of the people. That should not be limited. This is a big issue. This isn't, I want to cut down a tree in my yard. This is a large mining operation potentially that could impact everybody in the city. So why would we want to complicate this issue? Why would we want to rely on the planning commission, who is not elected, who is appointed, volunteers? As we saw with the Kroll decision, the citizens were limited to 3 minutes and 15 minutes total for comment before that vote was made. And it might have been you, Lloyd, on that committee at the time, I don't remember, who said, we want to deny this, we don't feel we can. We couldn't even, as a county, the lawyer and so on, read plain language that was in the existing permit process, 507A and B. We were told over and over B did not apply. The Supreme Court said that was plain, unambiguous language. This is not plain and unambiguous language. This is going to lead to more lawsuits. You all should make the decision. It should not be the Planning Commission. It should be a recommendation. Approve George's motion and move on. Move to page 7.
Thank you. I think at this point in time,
I may have not been
we
clear.
need- Nancy, could you please, I think we need some discussion. We've got two commissioners that haven't even had a chance to discuss the second motion, if I could, please. I didn't mean to shut you down,
Okay.
but we need to have some discussion on, I just want to explain two things. If this goes to a 2-2 vote, then it would go to the February 20th meeting and be decided at then. We could go to that. That way we could move on.
Right.
I just want to explain that to the commission and to the board and to the people out there that could be. So Nancy, now, what did you, I'd still like to get some comments in, but
I think this should be finally decided by the planning commission, but if you decide with the appeal thing, which I don't like, I think 5 days to appeal is too short a time period, because then it's going to move on schedule to a commission meeting, and the mining companies had years to prepare. The public needs more time to prepare. But I don't want it to go that way. I don't even want there to be an appeal process. I want it to be a final decision by the commission.
you,
I agree
Nancy.
with Hickey.
PJ, you had a comment?
PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. One thing with the appeals, if someone just puts in writing that they'd like this decision appealed, they don't have to have every Bible verse, everything ready. That can come later when the hearing is scheduled. Someone just needs to submit in writing that they want to appeal it, and we'll put it on a future agenda.
Thank you, PJ.
Chairman, can I ask
I'd
one
like to,
question?
oh yeah, you got a question?
Is that a
PJ?
commissioner too? Can appeal it?
It's not in this ordinance. I believe during the committee meeting, it was discussed and chose intentionally to be taken out.
Not that I remember.
It was, because we were mirroring what is in the conditional use permit ordinance, where it does allow the sitting commissioner in the planning commission to have something roll over from the planning commission to the board. It was talked about during our meetings, and it was intentionally taken out.
Do you have any follow-up to?
No, are we going to talk about two? Can I talk about this now?
Before we,
No, I'd like
We're
to,
we're doing something different.
before we vote, here's what the law says. A legislative decision is one that
Put your mic there, George, please.
enacts a permanent law or lays down a rule of conduct or course of policy. And there's no way that even the lawyers in this room can say that application of this ordinance fits in that definition. What we do when we apply this ordinance is quasi-judicial.
thank you, Mr. Farragut.
The ordinance or resolution
Got it, George.
can be referred. Like the wheel tax, that was an ordinance. We referred that.
Thank you, Mr. Farragut. Mark, did you have any discussion? Because I got something. too.
Mr. Chair, my concern is that we'll have everything going, that's any argument at all as to whether or not we issue a permit, that it could go to referendum. That is my concern, if we accept Mrs. Parker's version of it. My question, I guess, would be, can we come to a middle ground where we would give additional time, that seems to be one of the concerns, to appeal, and that we change likely to be financially harmed or physically injured to affected by? Would that satisfy, won't satisfy everyone, I'm sure, but would it be satisfactory is my question.
Chairman.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Ms. Hadcock?
Mark, I'm just going to tell you, it's been a year and a month and a couple of weeks added in there for myself. This has been a contentious item, and I've been trying to find solution, and I'm listening to you, and I think they're good ideas, what Mark has. I think if you do this, half this paragraph already is being done. So we can move forward, but again, I want to protect the public, but I also, with that, there is an appeal process that moves that forward no matter who you are to the next step. And I kept telling people this, the referendum is the issue with me. It's on consent, if it's on regular, if it's recommendation from the planning, I'm good. So, George, you probably read a piece of that, not the whole thing. Thank you,
Okay,
George.
now, are you
So,
done?
go ahead.
I think Mark's on the right track, because I think, Deb, you're still reading that part
Nope,
in the motion
I'm
that's on the
good.
floor. But I think staff did a pretty good job of working on both sides. They added the affected under the appeal process, and anybody can appeal it. And I think Mark made a suggestion of 45 days.
No.
I,
Is it 45?
yeah, it's 30, and he said 40. He suggested compromise of 45, because
I didn't
Nancy.
make that suggestion,
No,
but one
Nancy
of the
did.
public did, and I. Yeah, 5.
Well, that's under page 6.
No, Nancy talked about the 30, not
Oh.
Mark. Mark, what was yours?
I didn't have I was asking for opinions as to how far we should extend the appeal process, that the public would feel that they were adequately heard and had time to make an appeal.
Well, I think we have two options here. Staff recommendations for 5 and 6 is as is, with the changing of, as you'd said, the appeal to the planning decision, the applicant of any person affected by a decision of the planning commission could do the appeal. And then we're now, the motion that is on the floor by Mr. Farabee and seconded by DeSanto is to adopt Ms. Kelsey's, I lost it again, there we go. So if there's no further discussion, I think we vote on Mr. Farabee's motion,
But I do have one more comment.
Substitute.
his substitute motion. No, there was no motion,
I have one more comment.
Mr. Farabee.
You two weren't here when we the county, had a $10 million lawsuit against us. Keep that in mind. A $10 million lawsuit. That's what we're trying to avoid here. That doesn't happen again. So you two weren't part of that. And so don't forget that. And that's the point that Mr. Hickey, Ms. Parker are trying to bring up.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Our
Mr.
staff is misreading that statute.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee.
Mr. Chairman, I have a substitute.
Ms. Hadcock.
I like what Commissioner DeSanto said to move it to effective. And the business days would be different, right, PJ, than we did anything else if it was 5 days. So tell me, between the appeal with this motion, sorry, I'm trying to figure out what that days should be. If it's 5 days, do they appeal, and then they get 5 days to appeal after our commission meeting?
Yeah, 5
right?
business days. So if it's approved on a Monday by the planning commission, we give until 5 PM the following Monday for an appeal.
Okay.
And
so
then
that's-
it's put on a future agenda.
Okay,
And it's the time between when the appeal arrives and that meeting when the appellant can submit their information. If, and this has only happened a few times, if in the past they don't have all their information, they can request for a continuation of that hearing.
okay. Mr. Hickey, can I ask you a question, sir? So the affected was an issue with that decision from Kroll, if that's what they're thinking, or George is saying. But the business days for 5 business days, tell me what is reasonable for the days of after a decision from the planning commission.
Well, an appeal from circuit court to the Supreme Court is 30 days, for example, okay? An appeal from an administrative agency to circuit court is 30 days. It's not business days, it's 30 calendar days. I mean, that's kind of what, I guess that's the standard, but, 5 business days, that's just an impossible burden. It has to be.
So somewhere
If you're
between.
not going to follow my suggestion, you have to increase it to at least 30 days. You can go 30 calendar days.
Between 5 and 30 is what you're thinking then.
Sorry?
From 5
Gord,
to
I
30.
can put 30 for now, and then we can have more discussion, but that would be affected and then 30 business days, and then this is first reading, and then if we find out that there's something in between there that's not working for the 30 days, we can always come back. So that would be where I'm going for now then.
Well, and I think 30 business days is actually longer than 30 days, frankly.
Well, and it does say that, sir. It says, Mr. Hickey.
So you'd have-
Yes.
I'd do 15.
That would be my, well, we can put 30 and then we can come back on second reading just to change it if that's where we're going. But I would like to put 30 until we decide that there's a reason why we'd change it from here till then.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I would point out that although Mr. Hickey is correct, when you appeal from the Board of Commissioners to the Circuit Court, you have 30 days. There are many more requirements involved in an appeal to the Circuit Court or from the Circuit Court to the Supreme Court. You have to file a notice of appeal with a statement of issues, and there's other requirements. In this instance, as Mr. Conover has stated, all that's required is you to walk to the counter of the Planning and Zoning Department and write out, I want to appeal. That's it. So although I'm not disagreeing that with perhaps that we want to extend the 5 days, I just wanted to point out that there is a difference in the process.
My motion would be affected in 30 days for now, and then it could be changed. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have a discussion on it and why we would have 5, why we would have 30, and I believe there will be a compromise. So that would be my motion for now.
No. Could you please reread your motion?
Basically, you're changing, instead of physically harm, you're affected, and business days on that paragraph would be 30 days.
So the motion that she's making is to approve page 5 and 6 with changing on page 6,
Affected.
scratching out own real property, 500 feet limit, persons likely to financially harmed, and just putting affected in there. And changing from planning, appeal shall be written to the planning department instead of 5 business days. Ms. Hadcock suggesting 30 business days or just 30 days?
Within 30 days, business days.
You wouldn't want to say business. That would exclude weekends and holidays. It would just be 30 days.
Sorry.
And
Okay.
you'd need to make that same change on page 5 in paragraph 2 under public hearing. Has the same language, so you'd need to make the change there as well.
Okay, underneath public hearings,
Days prior, which would be,
so you'd have to scratch working days to just 30 days.
30 days instead of business days.
On part 2 of public hearings, and part F would be 30 days, not business days. Carrie, you got that?
Just be regular days.
Yeah, from 5 days to 30.
Yes. And the change is effective. And that was a substitute motion. Is there a second for discussion? I'll second for discussion. Looks like we got a line of people.
Brian Tiedemann was.
Brian, I just want to make it aware to the people, I'm going to let these go forward, but we're struggling to do our work because we don't get to do much comments. So the next part I'll probably.
Okay, fair enough. Just a quick clarifying item since I was on the committee. Wanted to clarify how we got to the language for the appeal. I think the original word was aggrieved. The word affected was discussed. The general, I guess, take on the word affected, and this came up through the Planning Commission discussion as well and the public hearing they had, is that affected is far too broad. There's really no limits on anybody that would want to disrupt the process and backlog it with comments from anywhere, really, regarding the issue. So that was how we got away from the word affected. It just opens up the door for literally anything that could come in to force an appeal. I guess the question is that what you really want? So.
Nancy, we've got a line of people that want to speak. You just.
Hi, Trevor Wendt.
What was your name?
Trevor Wendt. around the affected, not affected, I think it's fairly telling, all the lawyers, of which I'm not, but working on this language in the industry, the affected is a broad area, and it should stay that way because it's affecting everybody in the county potentially, and all the visitors that we have here too. Secondly, as far as the decision, who makes that final decision? Basically, when Kroll did come up, the reason that that $10 million lawsuit was brought up is exactly what we're not fixing here, is the planning commission approved that decision for the mining permit. It was appealed. Kroll felt whatever, and they filed the lawsuit. So by not rectifying that process here, you're just going to potentially have your same problem that we have, that we're trying to remedy with the current ordinance.
Thank you. No, Nancy?
Fairwood, I've got one more comment. I'll make it quick. Okay, Deb, I don't think this fixes a problem that you are wanting to fix. The Pete Lean lawyer stood up and read in that reference case what the Supreme Court ruled as far as what was legislative, what was administrative. Keeping the appeal, who makes a decision, it's going to be legislative either way because there's discretion in your opinion. And in that decision by the county commission, by the planning commission, it's based on discretion. And I'm not a lawyer. That is what she explained. So who makes this decision does not affect that. The county or the citizens could still take that to referendum because there's discretion, it's legislative. That is what I heard, and I'm not a lawyer. You are complicating the issue by not just using the language that's been recommended and made a motion. This group needs to make the final decision. It needs to be a recommendation. It needs to be approved by you. And the whole referendum thing is not affected. I mean, it's not part of this discussion, the way I have heard what evidence has been submitted. We're just complicating this,
Thank you.
and we shouldn't do that.
Nancy, one more time before we get...
I agree with Brian Tiedemann. I don't think that, I disagree. I don't think the committee could agree on the effective thing, and it was highlighted and sent to the Planning Commission as a highlighted thing for them to think about, and Kathy Johnson wrote the language that ended up in the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission inserted it.
Thank
So
you.
I don't think the committee ever came to any agreement on that.
Thank you. I seconded the motion on this, and my personal belief is I like the process that it goes through the planning commission, and if there's somebody who wants to appeal it, they appeal it, and it comes to the commission. I like that for the simple fact that we have it in ordinance, and it's not that difficult to change. I've heard a lot of testimony, and I know me and Deb have had this discussion because she's been on the committee, and we've heard a lot of it today. But I think to have it all come to the commission, we just heard it can be appealed either way. It really can, from my understanding. So I think we're just getting hung up on one thing. The 30-day, I only supported the motion for the 30 days because with the conception that on second reading, we could maybe modify that and have some more discussion and do some more research on the backside. So with that, I think there's been a substitute motion to approve 5 and 6 with the changes of the 45-day appeal dates.
30.
30, I'm sorry. From 5 to 30. And with the understanding that it's probably during second reading, it's going to come up again. That would be my understanding. So any further discussion, Mr. Farabee?
One more time for the record. I'm looking at the pocket supplement now, and there was a case after that Birchman case or whatever, but our application of this document, the zoning ordinance, is not referable. So where you get to refer them, when we rewrite this ordinance or do an ordinance, a resolution, they're referable. But when we apply this ordinance to a set of facts, it's quasi-judicial or administrative, and it's not referable.
What's the law, George?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farabee. That was,
Sunsec, if we could, George, what's?
Beechin versus Moody is in the pocket supplement.
What's the law on it?
It's the one that sheet is 718A-15.1. Ordinances and resolutions, amendments thereto are obviously appealable or referable. Remember, we referred to wheel tax.
thank you, Mr. Farabee. Motion on the floor.
The city is referring to water resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee. Motion's on the floor. Any further discussion from this board?
Okay. I have a little different subject. My name is Doug Peterson. I spent most of my life in the mining business. Now I'm retired. I find myself on the edge of a mine. At 500 feet, should probably be 2,000 feet. I know how disruptive mining can be. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Doug. So we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
So we come up with a tie. So what's going to end up happening is this will get referred back to February 20th. We'll bring it back up then.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
we're gonna have to do something different, because we got a lot of pages, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm getting brain dead on this.
We could take another break.
Commission, what is your wish to keep moving forward on this? It is 9:30, and I don't know if you guys are doing okay, but, and I apologize, public, but either we're gonna have to have another special meeting or have a long commission meeting, and I think that's not good either, because people can't get the whole day off work for us to go through an ordinance either.
Well, I would suggest, Ms. Hadcock,
Go ahead, sir.
we've done public comment, so I think the free work, we could do another meeting on Thursday. That's not enough notice, though, is it? You gotta have 2 days' notice. Let's do Friday. Next week, I'm out of town.
Ms. Holly, we need some help.
Well, Mr. Chair, we're a five-member commission, and
Mr. Farabee.
And I think we need to resolve the issue first. Is a fifth person going to be in attendance or not before we shouldn't even be doing this without a fifth person.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee.
That's first things first to me is.
I think Deb's got a question on possibly a second meeting, special meeting.
You can certainly go Thursday. Next regularly scheduled commission meeting would be the 20th. You could attempt the 22nd, or you could go the 27th. Those are your drop dead final dates.
We have a special on the Tuesday night. Are you gone Tuesday next week?
20th, yes.
We have a commission meeting that day.
I leave at 4.
Oh.
So I think we either do it this week, we'd have to do it. But Mark's not available on Friday?
Nope, I'm gone.
Thursday I have commitments.
What's that?
Thursday I have commitments. Can we do it? We can't do it tomorrow night, right, Holly? Because
It's too short a notice.
Yeah, Thursday I have a. Yeah.
Yeah, we struggle with that. We either try to get.
We're on page 6. Next, we're on page 7, and we have 22.
What about Tuesday, the 27th?
I can
Say
make
the 27th is your absolutely last opportunity to approve the second reading.
second reading.
Second reading.
It has to be done by the 27th. Otherwise, you run the risk of going back to your old regulations.
What is the possibility, I'm just throwing this out there, of approving the first reading and having a special meeting before second reading?
You can do that. You can get the first one on the record tonight, and with everybody understanding that anything can be changed between now and then. Schedule another one and still try and get your second reading on the 20th or the 27th.
I think before the motion like that gets being made, we pick a date for the second for a special meeting.
You'll be gone for the 20th? You're not here at the 20th?
21st, 22nd. I come back the 23rd during the day, so the
That Tuesday.
23rd is a Friday.
You won't have your 20th. He won't be here.
I can meet on Friday, the 23rd.
Friday the 23rd. How about,
George? I'm good Friday the 23rd. George, you okay?
I don't know. Depends upon Mother Nature. I could get snowed in, it's still winter,
We'll have Tom come get you.
okay?
now,
Bring the snow
now,
plow for you.
Well, almost for sure.
okay, now let's get this straight, because I think everybody's had a long night, and we've had some great discussion. We got a lot of public comment, and I think you guys know that where we're at is on that 23rd, we're gonna have to get down and do some work. Should go a lot faster, is what I'm hoping. But in order to do the 23rd meeting, we'd have to approve this for first reading. And with the understanding,
Are you gonna skip the 20th on our regular commission meeting, or do you wanna try and get some work done that day too?
we can try and get some work done. I was thinking getting the first reading done, and then we could work on the 20th also, do some work on the 20th. And then 23rd, do some follow-up, but I'd like to get the first reading done, so then we could do that. If that's,
So the 20th, we could do the first
we
reading.
could do, well, I'd like to do the first reading tonight, and we could do some more work on it on the 20th.
I'll make a motion that we continue the first reading until the 20th of February.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to continue to first reading to the 20th of February. Any discussion? Deb?
No, I'm good.
I'm not really in support of that. I think we could get the first reading done and do some work on it
I think
at the 20th meeting, and then schedule the 23rd. I'm afraid if things get pushed along too long, we're going to be backed up against the wall.
Commissioner, or Chairman,
Mrs. Hadcock.
only because I'm thinking everybody thought we were doing first reading, going through the whole packet, and then they were going to comment on this first reading so we can do the second. And if that didn't happen, it would be, I don't think, a good thing to approve first reading until at least we got through most of the controversial issues on this. If we went past a bunch of that, that would be different. But I agree with Commissioner Fairby and Commissioner DeSanto, just the public, just to being fair, just do first reading on February 20.
Mr. Chair.
But I do want to make the comment real quick. February 20th has a full agenda on it. And so if we do this, I'm going to put it at the end of the agenda, because all those people need to get their stuff done and approved and so forth. And I know we're going to have a shut-off time on that day.
Or you have to leave.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned that, for the public, let's just set it at 1 o'clock on the 20th. I'll amend my motion to continue the first reading until 1 o'clock on the 20th.
We're good. We'll just do the meeting, George, and then it's at the end of the meeting and we go till we get to page 22.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
I believe we should stay here till 10:30 today. We're not going to not do the first reading, but let's put another hour in.
I don't have a problem with that.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
I'm
So
going to say, I think we're done.
Essentially, we only made it to 4 pages.
We're on page 7, actually.
No,
why I think we should go
we'll
till
have to deal
10:30.
with 5 and 6. So we just as well as deal with that on the 20th. We'll start on page 5 and 6 again.
So we made a motion to go to February 20th, didn't we? First reading? Did we make a motion, Ms.
Yep.
Kara?
We did.
Yeah, okay, so we can adjourn?
No, you gotta vote on
Gotta
it.
vote.
You gotta vote
You
on it.
guys didn't make a motion on page 5 or 6, right?
No.
Well, it was a 2-2.
No, we
It was a
didn't.
2-2 tie, which
So you're
refers,
going to go back to page 5
Okay,
and 6
so
on the
now-
20th?
yep,
Okay.
Now we have to vote, right, Jerry?
yes.
Okay.
All in favor of continuing first reading to February 20th, say aye.
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 All opposed? Aye.
Are you gonna set a specific time on the 23rd?
5:30.
5:30.
Gonna do a Friday night?
I
meeting
think we should do it earlier.
Or a Friday day meeting?
Or 4 o'clock or something that's, people can at least reasonably get here on time if it's.
Let's have a show of hands, 5:30. We can, how about a
Or
show of
4
hands?
o'clock.
4, George, 4.
Yeah, let's
4
go.
o'clock,
4
4
o'clock.
o'clock.
It's Friday,
the 23rd.
next week.
That's for second reading.
Let's do 4 o'clock Friday.
The 23rd.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion Friday, 23rd, 4 o'clock.
Let's get a show of hands here first.
We've done it twice
We're
now.
good. We're good. People are with 4.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor for the 23rd at 4 o'clock.
Who made that one?
Second. Deb Hadcock, seconded by Mr. DeSanto. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Whoa,
I move we adjourn.
second.
Moved by Farabee, second by Hadcock to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?